Chapter 1100. Who exactly are you? As soon as he returned to the celestial realm, De Ming Luan flashed to the side and asked. He still did not believe that the person in front of him was Yu Qianqiu, but he felt that this person was related to Yu Qianqiu and the others. Yu Qianqiu wanted to use his divine sense to take De Ming Luan away, but De Ming Luan guarded against him as if he was a thief. De Ming Luan's divine sense forced him away and quickly dodged. Yu Qianqiu looked around speechlessly. After confirming that there was no one around, he quickly removed the disguise on his face. You. De Ming Luan looked at him in disbelief. He did not expect that it was really Yu Qianqiu. What about you? Hurry up and come with me. Yu Qianqiu's divine sense enveloped him, and he directly teleported to the underground palace in Utopia. Then he teleported to the underground base in the Divine Ruin realm. De Ming Luan was dumbfounded as he looked at the changing scenery around him. He shook his head as if he was dreaming. He was so shocked that he could not speak for a long time. Coincidentally, Yunnan Tian, who was leisurely observing the structure of the base, flashed past. Yu Qianqiu quickly waved his hand and said, "Where did Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Ping go?" Yunnan Tian was stunned. He looked at De Ming Luan in surprise, then pointed to the depths of the underground tunnel and replied, "They seem to be living in the innermost part. I don't know which room they are in exactly." "Let's go," Yu Qianqiu called out. De Ming Luan followed him doubtfully. The two of them turned left and right in the base and almost lost their way. They had no choice but to call Zhang Peng. Under Zhang Peng's lead, the two of them finally arrived at an underground cave. The so-called cave was an underground karst cave. An underground river flowed in the middle. There were many naturally formed caves on the other side of the river, causing the cave to have a universe inside. It was indeed a good place for meditation. "Old monster. I've already brought him back for you." Yu Qianqiu stood on the other side of the river and roared. His voice reverberated throughout the cave. Two people immediately appeared from the two caves on the opposite side. They were Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu. The two of them looked at the great bright wheel up and down. They heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that Yu Qianqiu was fine. They looked at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully but did not say a word of thanks. When De Ming Luan saw the two of them, he was a little stunned. "You're both here? What is this place?" Wei Chuanxiu pouted at Yu Qianqiu and said, "This kid said he's in the Divine Ruin realm." Divine Ruin realm? De Ming Luan looked at the few people with a head full of fog and said, "What the hell is going on? How can you guys enter the Divine Ruin realm? Also, why did you bring me here? Nie Xiaoqian and the others are still waiting for me." He looked left and right, thinking that he didn't know how to leave, so he said angrily, "Hurry up and send me back. It's the way I brought you in." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Don't think too much about the rest. It's too dangerous for you to go back now. I can't let you go back and risk your life with them." You don't know this, but not long after you left, Wu Xiong exposed his hidden identity. It turns out that he's in cahoots with Wang Qing. They have a group of people in the underworld who are attacking the Dark Imperial Palace. Since they dare to rebel in the underworld, they must have something to rely on. If you follow Nie Xiaoqian and the others now, aren't you courting death? Attacking the Dark Imperial Palace? Wu Xiong and Wang Qing are in cahoots? De Ming Luan was shocked. "I'm not sure what exactly happened, but I heard Wu Xiong call Wang Qing Big Brother." Yu Qianqiu immediately gave a rough account of what happened at that time. After listening, Wei Chuanxiu nodded in agreement and said, "De Ming Luan, this kid is right. You can't follow Nie Xiaoqian and the others anymore. Let's lie low in the Divine Ruin realm for now. If it's appropriate, it won't be too late for us to go out." Wu Xiong called Wang Qing Big Brother? Who are their father and aunt? How dare they attack the Dark Imperial Palace? De Ming Luan muttered to himself. After pondering for a long time, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Yu Qianqiu, tell me honestly, are you sure we can stay safe and sound in the Divine Ruin realm? As far as I know, the Divine Ruin realm is also a place with an owner." Yu Qianqiu was startled. He shook his head and said, "I really can't guarantee that. I'm not familiar with the situation in the Divine Ruin realm, but there shouldn't be any danger in the short term where we are temporarily staying. Since that's the case, I still have to go out and meet up with Nie Xiaoqian and the others." De Ming Luan frowned and said, "People who don't think far ahead will have immediate worries. You can't treat everything with hope, but you have to fight for it. Currently, Jin Tai and Bai Qi haven't completely failed. No one knows what the final outcome will be. If Jin Tai makes a comeback, then my position in the Immortal Palace will become more and more stable. At that time, anyone in the immortal world who wants to touch you will have to think twice. If Jin Tai and Bai Qi completely fail, it won't be too late for me to return. In short, now is not the time to give up so easily. Even if you're not in the immortal palace, we can still live well. We don't need you to take care of us. Wei Chuanqiu said snappily. Deming Luan smiled faintly and said, I didn't say how to take care of you. Just treat it as leaving a way out for you to play a role at a critical moment. Saying that, he turned to look at Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, quickly send me out. If I take too long, it will arouse their suspicions. Wei Chuanqiu still wanted to say something, but Yun Peng pulled him back and shook his head slightly, indicating that there was no point in arguing. Yu Qianqiu looked at both sides and saw that it was useless to continue persuading them. He immediately sighed and said, Then I'll go with you. With me by your side, if there's any danger, I can bring you back at any time. Saying that, he returned to Niu Yid's appearance. Doing this was tantamount to taking the same risk as the Deming Luan, but relatively speaking, if he could bring the Deming Luan back at any time, then the Deming Luan's safety would be greatly increased. Hearing this, Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu looked at Yu Qianqiu in unison. Their hearts were filled with gratitude, but they didn't show it. The Deming Luan still wanted to refuse, but Yu Qianqiu had already pulled him away and disappeared into the cave. When the two of them returned to the netherworld through the passageway between the two worlds, they found that there was no one outside. They didn't know where Nie Xiaoqian and the others had gone. While they were looking at each other, Nie Xiaoqian and the others flashed out from hiding on both sides, showing how careful these people were. Deming Luan, why were you gone for so long? Nie Xiaoqian's eyes flashed as she focused on Yu Qianqiu, who was standing next to the Deming Luan. Next to her, Qingyang looked at Yu Qianqiu with a slightly suspicious gaze. Chief Steward, please don't be so suspicious. This subordinate has received some bad news and is waiting for Chief Steward to make a decision. The Deming Luan quickly told them about Wu Xiong's betrayal and the attack on the Netherworld Royal Palace. After hearing this, everyone revealed a shocked expression. Nie Xiaoqian coldly snorted and said, I was wondering why Wu Xiong didn't escape with us. So he was with them. No wonder the immortal emperor felt that something was wrong with him and asked me to secretly send people to investigate him. It's a pity that he took the initiative. Otherwise he would be begging for death. What do we do now? Do we still rush to the Netherworld Royal Palace? The Deming Luan asked. Then what do you think we should do? Nie Xiaoqian slightly sighed and said, even if the Netherworld Royal Palace is really attacked, we still have to find a way to meet up with the immortal emperor. If we follow the immortal emperor, we might have another way out. Otherwise, with just the few of us, I'm afraid we won't be able to survive. Everyone was silent. Who would have thought that the sky would change so suddenly? Nie Xiaoqian waved her hand and said, let's go to the Netherworld Royal Palace. Along the way we'll act according to the situation. Under the dark blue sky, the sounds of battle could be heard. Around the main peak of the Minghuang Mountain, which was surrounded by 5 peaks, there were as many people as ants fighting each other. Violent explosions could be heard continuously. Flashes of light flew everywhere and blood and flesh flew everywhere. Screams of pain could be heard continuously. Amidst the rolling dark clouds in the sky, huge green snakes that were as thick as dragons opened their bloody mouths and launched sneak attacks on people who flew by at lightning speed, biting them to death and swallowing them into their stomachs. On the ground, there were all kinds of ferocious monsters colliding with each other. Some had huge bodies, some had sharp fangs, and some had thick scales. They fought and tore at each other, not stopping until one of them was dead. Around the Minghuang Mountain, there were chaotic battles and rivers of blood. The pungent smell of blood stimulated the ferocious monsters, causing them to roar loudly and become more and more restless. Countless black-armored soldiers and all kinds of ferocious-looking monsters attacked the Minghuang Mountain from all directions. The Minghuang Mountain was also filled with people who were defending against the enemies. Soldiers in silver, purple, blue and yellow armors were mixed together in battle formations. It looked messy, but in fact it was orderly. The main peak of Minghuang Mountain was protected by a dazzling white light shield. 4 men in silver, purple, blue and yellow armors stood on top of the shield, back to back, watching the battle around them. These 4 people were the 4 underworld generals under the command of the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. They were the silver-armored Thousand Soldiers, the purple-armored Proud Soldiers, the blue-armored Heavenly Soldiers and the yellow-armored Victorious Soldiers. Seeing the rebel army launching an even more ferocious attack, the blue-armored Heavenly Soldier waved his hand and shouted angrily, "Fire the soul-slaying bows!" The blue-armored soldiers, who were mixed with the other 3 armies, pulled their bowstrings together. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of arrowheads shining with blue light shot out in all directions, and the sound of bowstrings being pulled rang out. Swish, swish. Countless blue lines shot out in all directions, illuminating this part of the world. For a moment, the sky was filled with horrifying screams. There was nowhere to hide from the rain of arrows. Even if they managed to dodge one arrow, they wouldn't be able to dodge the countless arrows. They didn't know what these arrows were made of, but they could easily break through the protective energies. Regardless of whether the depth of the arrows was fatal or not, as long as they were hit by the arrows, their bodies would immediately emit black smoke, and their eyes would roll back as they fell to the ground. Wave after wave of arrows were shot out, and the people in the sky kept falling. The people on the ground fell like wheat being reaped. The attackers couldn't get close at all. If there was a fish that slipped through the net or an expert that barged in and launched a fierce attack, the yellow-armored soldier would immediately put together the shield in his hand and burst out a towering yellow pillar of light to counteract the fierce attack. The purple-armored soldier would immediately brandish his huge sickle to kill. Often, several sickles would hook onto a person at the same time, tearing them apart or cutting them into pieces. Chapter 1101. Countless soldiers in white armor, each holding a halberd, swept across the Minghuang mountain like a whirlwind. Wherever there were strong enemies, they would come to help. They waved their halberds and swore to defend the Minghuang mountain with their lives. The whole Minghuang mountain was a combination of long-range and short-range attacks. It was as solid as an iron bucket. Wave after wave of fierce attacks were repelled. Just as the attackers retreated in fear, they saw countless broken limbs falling down from the Minghuang mountain. Corpses piled up at the foot of the mountain. Blood flowed everywhere, and the thick smell of blood filled the air. Some bloodthirsty monsters couldn't bear to give up on the delicious food in front of them. They didn't retreat with the troops. Instead, they lay on the piles of corpses and ate them. Immediately, dozens of blue lights shot out from the mountain. The monsters couldn't dodge in time. After being hit by the arrows, they fell down with black smoke rising from their bodies, becoming one of the piles of corpses. In the distance, many forces belonging to the Minghuang Palace knew that someone was attacking the Minghuang Palace. Therefore, they came from all over the underworld to help the king. The rebellious army of Dark Nether had also gathered a large number of troops from all directions. Their numbers and strength were obviously superior to the troops sent to rescue the emperor. Both sides were engaged in a fierce battle in the surroundings of the Minghuang mountain. Standing on the white light shield, the silver-armored 1,000 soldiers looked down at the Minghuang mountain. Seeing that another attack had been repelled, he said solemnly, "Something is wrong. It doesn't look like the Black Pool Bitch's force is rebelling. There are other forces adding fuel to the fire. Immediately send a message to the army stationed in the Endless Horizon to bring all the Purgatory army here." The other three were slightly shocked. The purple-armored Ao Jun said, "I'm afraid this is not appropriate. The Purgatory army needs to suppress the countless prisoners in the Endless Horizon. If the army brings all the Purgatory army here, once the prisoners escape, they will become a great threat to the Minghuang Palace. You should know that all the prisoners in the Endless Horizon hate the Minghuang Palace to the core." The silver-armored 1,000 soldiers took a deep breath of the thick smell of blood in the air and shouted coldly, "Kill! Let the army execute all the prisoners immediately." "Execute all the prisoners?" The three of them exclaimed in shock at the same time. After so many years, there were already over 100 million prisoners imprisoned in the Endless Horizon. What did it mean to kill all of them? Huang Jia Xingjun sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "There are nearly 100 million prisoners imprisoned in the Endless Horizon. They are the coolies who forge weapons for the Dark North Palace. If we kill them all, we will cut off the source of our weapons, and in the future we will be suppressed by the Immortal Realm. An army of 1,000. You should think twice before you act. You worry too much." The silver-armored 1,000 soldier waved his hand and pointed at the densely packed rebel army that was rushing over from afar. He said sternly, "Kill all the prisoners in the Endless Horizon. After that, there will be many more people here to replace them. Why worry about the Endless Horizon running out of coolies? You've heard the news from the Immortal Realm. Once the Immortal Palace collapses, the entire force of the Immortal Palace will immediately collapse. We can't afford to lose the Underworld Royal Palace. It is the symbol of the Underworld Sovereign's rule over the Underworld. Once the Underworld Royal Palace falls, people's hearts will change. No one will take the risk to come to our aid. So, what we need to do is to kill the rebels at all costs and protect the Underworld Royal Palace until the Underworld Sovereign returns. As long as the Underworld Royal Palace stands in the Underworld, as long as the symbol of the Underworld Sovereign's rule over the Underworld remains, those who have ulterior motives will not dare to act recklessly. Do you understand what I mean?" The three of them looked solemn and immediately understood the seriousness of the matter. purple-armored proud soldier said in a low voice. I will send a message to Zhang Jun, not just you. The silver-armored thousand soldier pointed at the three of them and himself and said, if you alone send a message to him to kill over 100 million prisoners in the endless horizon, Zhang Jun will definitely hesitate. After all, the responsibility is too great. The four of us must all send a message to him, explaining the seriousness of the matter and urging him to make a decision immediately. The four of them agreed without hesitation. They all took out jade talismans, wrote down the contents and crushed them. However, because of this decision, when the red-armored soldier in the endless horizon received the message from the four of them, he immediately pulled on the red iron chains around his body. His entire body was filled with murderous intent. He immediately sent the bloodiest and cruelest order in history to his subordinates. For a moment, the entire endless horizon was filled with miserable screams. Roar! A deafening roar suddenly came from the sky. The silver-armored thousand soldier and the other three quickly looked up. They saw a green shadow flashing in the dense dark clouds. The green giant snakes that were sneakily attacking in the sky all scattered in fear. A snake head the size of a small mountain, glowing with green light, broke through the dark clouds and reached out. Its body, which was 100 meters long and 5 meters in diameter, was faintly discernible in the dark clouds. Although it looked similar to the other green snakes, it was 4 to 5 times the size of the other green snakes. On the head of the green snake that was the size of a small mountain, glowing with green light, grew 2 ferocious and translucent horns that looked like green crystals. 2 large red eyes flickered. Between the 2 shining red eyes stood the cold and elegant Lady Blackpool. Her black dress fluttered in the bloody night wind. Behind her, between the 2 horns of the giant snake head, stood a man in a black robe. He wore a black bamboo hat that covered half of his face and held a monk's staff with many earrings in his hand. His face couldn't be seen clearly, making him look rather mysterious. A clear and melodious giggle sounded in the bloody night sky. Lady Blackpool covered her mouth and looked at the top of Minghuang Mountain with a smile. Silver-armored thousand soldier, you have always been bossy and rude to me. I bet you never dreamed that this day would come. A halberd suddenly appeared in the silver-armored thousand soldier's hand. He waved his arm and pointed at Lady Blackpool from afar. He yelled, "Bitch Blackpool! How dare you show yourself? You are still so stubborn even when you are about to die." Lady Blackpool looked at the entire Minghuang Mountain with disdain. She looked at the 4 armored soldiers on the mountain and clicked her tongue. I didn't expect Bai Qi to have so many people hidden in the dark. All of them are well equipped. It seems like Bai Qi really invested everything he had. No wonder we couldn't take them down after such a long time. She turned to the man with the monk's staff and bamboo hat behind her and nodded, "Big brother. I didn't expect Bai Qi to be hiding his true strength from me. Minghuang Mountain is heavily guarded by them. Normal warriors can't even get close to them. It seems like I need to take action personally, big brother." The man with the monk's staff slightly nodded. Silver-armored thousand soldier and the others heard Lady Blackpool calling the man big brother, and were confused. Since when did Blackpool have a big brother? Silver-armored thousand soldier pointed his halberd at the man in the bamboo hat and yelled, "Who are you? How dare you rebel with this slut? Could it be that you're tired of living?" Without saying a word, the man in the bamboo hat took out a few human heads with tangled hair and threw them to the peak of the Minghuang Mountain. The silver-armored thousand soldier caught the heads with his halberd and took a closer look at them. He was shocked when he saw their faces. He raised his head and glared at the man in the bamboo hat. "You are the king of the Black Mountain?" These people were none other than the people he had sent to investigate the origin of the mysterious king of the Black Mountain in the clear underworld. Now that the other party had suddenly thrown out these heads, their identity was self-evident. Half of the man's face was hidden under the large bamboo hat and he did not answer. He suddenly raised the staff in his hand and shook it. On the pumpkin-shaped head of the staff that was protected by 9 large rings, dozens of earrings in the 9 large rings rang. Ding-ling-dang-lang. The crisp sound of the earrings resounded through heaven and earth. Immediately, 9 pitch-black whirlwinds swayed out from the head of the staff and flew into the night sky that was filled with the smell of blood. The 9 whirlwinds, which were originally only the size of a fist, suddenly expanded, forming 9 black tornadoes that connected the heavens and the earth. In an instant, heaven and earth changed color, and the tornadoes twisted and dragged on the ground, howling as they surrounded the Minghuang Mountain. The people fighting on the ground didn't care whether they were friend or foe. As long as they got close to the 9 black whirlwinds, they would be sucked in by a powerful suction force. As long as they were swallowed, they would scream and die. The 9 black tornadoes were like scavengers. Wherever they went, the densely packed crowd and corpses were immediately cleaned up. Everyone was so frightened that they all retreated far away, leaving clear marks on the ground as they passed. In just a short while, the 9 black tornadoes surrounded the Minghuang mountain from all directions. The soldiers all over the mountain couldn't help but look at each other in horror at the sight of the terrifying tornadoes. They didn't know how to deal with them. A huge purple scythe appeared in the hands of the proud purple-armored soldier. A wide blue bow appeared in the hands of the blue-armored soldier. A shield covered with inscriptions appeared in the hands of the victorious yellow-armored soldier, and a long-handled broadsword appeared in the hands of the victorious yellow-armored soldier. All of them looked very serious. Before the 9 black whirlwinds could reach the foot of the mountain, the silver-armored soldier waved his halberd and roared, "Attack the target!" The other 3 also roared, "Attack!" In an instant, countless blue arrows were shot toward the 9 whirlwinds. Yellow light burst into the sky, trying to stop the approaching whirlwinds. White light and purple scythe shadows burst forth, but they seemed to have no effect on the 9 black whirlwinds. The whirlwinds didn't stop at all. Ding-ling-dang-lang. The earrings on the staff rang again, and the countless blue arrows that had been swallowed by the tornado suddenly shot back. Instantly, a large number of soldiers on Minghuang Mountain fell to the ground. The tornado stepped onto the Minghuang Mountain almost instantaneously, and with a series of clanging sounds, 9 tornadoes circled around the entire Minghuang Mountain from the foot of the mountain, forming a formation that spiraled upward. The desperate resistance of the soldiers on the mountain had no effect. Wherever the whirlwinds passed, they were easily sucked in and devoured. Immediately, the Minghuang Mountain experienced a catastrophe that hadn't been seen for a long time. Miserable screams rang out one after another. Despite the cruelty of the situation, none of the soldiers in the 4-colored armor tried to escape. In their desperate resistance, they could only watch helplessly as they were swallowed up by the whirlwinds. The silver-armored soldier and the other 3 glared at them. These were their trusted disciples who had followed them for many years. Chapter 11:02. Seeing the 9 spiraling tornadoes devouring the lives of the soldiers on the mountain, Lady Blackpool, who stood on the snake's head and watched silently, suddenly giggled and said, "1,000 soldiers. If the 4 of you kneel down and submit to me, I will consider letting you go." Shameless bitch. You are just a bitch who flatters the Emperor of Hell. You are not worthy of us submitting to you. Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers waved his halberd and shouted angrily. Lady Blackpool snorted coldly and turned to the man in the bamboo hat behind her. She gritted her teeth and said, "Big brother. We must capture this person alive. I will make him suffer a fate worse than death. Brothers, let's break it together." Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers pointed his halberd at the spiraling tornadoes. The 3 of them responded in unison, "We will obey. Let's go." Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers rushed out with his halberd in hand. The 3 of them followed without hesitation. The 4 of them rushed to one of the tornadoes and attacked at the same time. 4 rays of light that shook the heavens and the earth shot out together. Boom. The air vibrated violently and instantly shattered the tornado. However, the wind was shapeless and the clouds were shapeless. The clanking sound from the earrings of the monk's staff sounded again. The scattered tornado instantly condensed and formed again. The happy expressions on the 4 of their faces froze. Ding-ling-dang-lang, the sound of the monk's staff seemed to contain an inexhaustible amount of magic. The tornado suddenly split into 4 and surrounded the 4 of them. Then, the tornado once again formed into a tornado, wrapping the 4 of them in the eye of the tornado. The eye of the tornado was filled with great pressure. At the same time, countless tangible wind blades were condensed and attacked the 4 of them. Not good. Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers used all his strength to strike with his halberd. The force was instantly dissipated by the spinning tornado. He immediately shouted, "Hurry, let's work together and open a way out." The wind whistled past their ears, and it was almost impossible to hear what they were saying to each other. However, the 4 of them could be said to be of one mind, and they simultaneously attacked in the same direction. Hong! 4 powerful rays of light instantly broke open a gap, and the 4 of them immediately teleported out. Almost at the same time that the 4 of them left, the gap closed. The 4 of them quickly returned to the top of the mountain. Looking at the tornado that continued to spiral towards the top of the mountain, then looking at their subordinates that were constantly being devoured, a trace of sorrow flashed across their faces. It wasn't that they didn't want to risk their lives, but they simply couldn't do anything about this strange tornado. They had a feeling of helplessness as if they had nowhere to use their strength. "We can't let our brothers die in vain. Huang Jia Shengjun cried out in sorrow. Silver-armored thousand soldiers' bones creaked, knowing that they couldn't hold the Minghuang mountain for much longer. Just as he was about to order everyone to retreat, a furious roar came from the distance. How dare you? This voice was so familiar. The four of them shuddered, their faces full of joy. The Emperor of the Underworld is back, the silver-armored soldier exclaimed. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, only to see a white light and a golden glow cutting through the night sky. Jintai, help me kill these traitors. The angry roar resounded through the sky again. The white light suddenly shot out a black light toward the ground. The black light instantly expanded in the shape of a fan. The light engulfed and strangled the crowd below. Suddenly there was a series of screams. Countless people were turned into ashes under the rotating strangulation of the black light. The Emperor of the Underworld is back. Someone shouted in fear. The name, Emperor of the Underworld, was a very powerful deterrent in the underworld. Countless people immediately fled without a care in the world. At the same time, a golden rod instantly grew to several hundred meters long. It spun as it was tossed out. It rushed into the crowd below and began to hit them without restraint. Amidst the rumbling sounds, screams rose and fell. People fled in all directions, unable to resist. The two streaks of light, one golden and one white, killed countless people in an instant. The two of them passed through the tornadoes and landed on the white barrier. The silver-armored soldier and the other three bowed in unison and said, "Greetings, Emperor of the Underworld, greetings, immortal Emperor." Bai Qi waved his hand and didn't pay attention to the four of them. He looked around at the 9 tornadoes with a gloomy expression. Listening to the incessant screams and seeing so many core forces of the immortal palace rapidly dying, Jin Tai's expression changed even more. Now that his immortal palace's forces had collapsed, he needed to borrow Bai Qi's forces to rebuild the immortal world. If he allowed Bai Qi's forces to collapse as well, he wouldn't have any forces left to take control of the immortal world. You dare to show off your insignificant skills here? See how I break it? Jin Tai shouted and spat out golden powder from his mouth. The powder turned into 9 golden clouds and rushed towards the 9 tornadoes. In an instant, they were all swallowed by the tornadoes, and the black tornadoes turned into a dark golden color in the blink of an eye. The dark golden light flashed in the tornadoes and the 9 tornadoes slowed down in an instant. The golden powder inside was spinning in the opposite direction to counteract the speed of the tornadoes. The power of the tornadoes lay in their rotation. Since they couldn't rotate anymore, they naturally couldn't become tornadoes and wouldn't have any destructive power. In the blink of an eye, the 9 tornadoes were annihilated, leaving only 9 golden dragons that connected the heaven and earth. Jin Tai opened his mouth and sucked the 9 golden dragons back into his stomach. It was a miraculous feat. Everyone on the mountain looked at Jin Tai with cold eyes. An immortal emperor was indeed an immortal emperor. Even the 4 underworld generals couldn't break it, but he just opened his mouth and broke it. The arrival of the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor gave the majority of the people on the mountain a sense of relief. Bai Qi glanced at Jin Tai and didn't expect him to do this. Jin Tai expressionlessly looked at the head of the giant snake in the sky and said, "I didn't expect someone in the underworld to know the wind manipulation technique. There was one in the immortal realm, but it was sealed by me." In front of the people, he still acted like an emperor and didn't feel like a stray dog. He turned to Bai Qi and asked, "Bai Qi, how did you do it? Hey Qi, this little bitch has been nurtured by you for a long time, but she still dares to bite you, her master. I told you to give her to me, but you didn't want to do it. Now you have raised a tiger and brought disaster to yourself." Bai Qi coldly stared at Madame He Qi and shouted, "Bitch, come over here and kneel." His shout scared many people. The power of the Emperor of the Underworld had seeped into their bones. Many soldiers of the army of the Underworld were already running away quietly. Even the Madam of Blackpool, who had been flattered by the Underworld Emperor for a long time, couldn't help but tremble in fear when she heard Bai Qi's stern shout. She almost knelt down and begged for mercy. However, it was just a momentary illusion. She had been preparing for this day for so many years. Madame He Qi took a deep breath and giggled at Bai Qi, "Your Majesty, the Emperor of the Underworld? How come this title is so hard to pronounce? Well, you joined hands with Jin Tai in the immortal realm, but you were defeated by the sect master of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qin. What right do you have to be the Emperor of the Underworld? Bai Qi, do you think you are qualified to control the Underworld Palace and enjoy the honor of the Emperor of the Underworld? Bitch, I will give you one last chance. Otherwise, you will be tortured for the rest of your life." Bai Qi said word by word, "Kneel down and accept your punishment." Haha. Madame He Chi suddenly laughed seductively. Bai Chi. If you kneel down and submit to me, I definitely won't kill you. I'll definitely spare your life and let you be my exclusive male pet. No matter if I'm in the netherworld, the human world, or the immortal world, I'll keep you by my side to serve me. What do you think? Bai Chi was so angry that he laughed. Good. 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 You're so daring. How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Bai Chi. Madame He Chi suddenly interrupted him. She recovered her cold and noble expression and said indifferently, hand over the obsidian hell light mirror, give up the throne of the Emperor of the Underworld and surrender to me. Otherwise today will be the day you die. You want to be the Emperor of the Underworld? Do you think you are qualified? Bai Chi slowly raised the obsidian underworld light mirror in his hand and asked. Jin Tai glanced at it. There was a sword mark left by the unmoved sword drawing style, but on the way here, the two of them found that the sword mark had disappeared. It was very magical. Bai Chi. It seems that this bitch has found a new backer. Otherwise she would not dare to be so presumptuous. Jin Tai looked at the man in the bamboo hat standing between the horns of the giant snake in the air. He found that the man had the cultivation of the last stage of the Emperor of the Underworld. He snorted coldly, wearing a bamboo hat hiding your head and tail. Are you afraid to meet people? The silver-armored soldiers on the side quickly cupped their hands and reported to Bai Chi, who was also paying attention to the man, Emperor of the Underworld. This man is the king of the Black Mountain. Bai Chi and Jin Tai looked at each other. The man in the bamboo hat slowly took off the bamboo hat on his head and revealed his original appearance. He looked at Jin Tai with sharp eyes and said indifferently, Jin Tai, we finally meet again. Jin Tai was startled when he saw the man's face. After a while he said in surprise, You are Wu Feng? You are the king of the Black Mountain? Wu and He agreed. The reason why I hid my name was because of you. The king of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng, said indifferently. Wu Feng. The sect master Wu Feng of the number 1 sect in the immortal realm, the wind evolution sect that you destroyed? Bai Chi also asked Jin Tai in surprise. Jin Tai didn't reply to Bai Chi. He looked at the king of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng, and said, You became a meditation cultivator after you died? I was wondering why the Imperial Wind technique looked so familiar. But it is amazing that you can cultivate to the last stage of the Emperor of the Underworld in these years. The king of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng, said indifferently, It is nothing amazing. It is only because I cultivated the Imperial Wind technique that I was fortunate enough to devour a wind spirit. So after you killed me, I was able to maintain my cultivation and consciousness. However, I can't compare to you. I can't restore the flesh and blood body of the immortal realm. I can only turn to the underworld and cultivate again. Jin Tai, you are a metal spirit. I believe you know the secret better than anyone. You devoured a wind spirit? Jin Tai's face was dark. Bai Chi looked at Jin Tai in surprise and said, You are a metal spirit. The king of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng, continued to speak indifferently. Before this, I couldn't be sure if you were a metal spirit or not. But I received news that after my son, Wang Qing, destroyed your flesh and blood body, you were able to reform it. Only then did I confirm that you are a metal spirit. It is laughable that you shamelessly boasted about cultivating an indestructible golden body. What a joke. Chapter 1103. Everyone turned to look at Jin Tai. Most of them had a look of confusion in their eyes. They didn't know what the metal spirit and wind spirit were, but those like Bai Chi who knew were all shocked. However, they were even more shocked that Wang Qing was the son of King Heishan. Wang Qing is your son. How is that possible? Jin Tai said with a gloomy face. Nothing is impossible. Jin Tai's despicable and shameless personality forced me to prepare myself. After the wind spread sect experienced the calamity of destruction, I, Wu Feng, left behind 2 bloodlines in the immortal world. Other than Wang Qing, Wu Xiong is also my son. Recalling the past, the king of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng, could not help but sigh. It's precisely because of the huge financial resources I plundered from the netherworld that the Heartless Palace created by Wang Qing could reach where it is today, and that Wu Xiong could become the great commander of the Immortal Palace's external affairs. Wu Xiong? No wonder it really was a deliberate scheme. Jin Tai sneered. Jin Tai, today is the day you end the Wu family. Madame Blackpool gritted her teeth and stared at Jin Tai angrily. Jin Tai snorted and stared at her coldly. Who are you in the Wu family? Madame Blackpool said word by word, Wu Yunfeng. Jin Tai said, I remember you. The Wind Development sect did have such a person. However, it was too long ago. If I remember correctly, you weren't as beautiful as you are now. Otherwise, I would have taken you in as a concubine in the immortal palace. You wouldn't have the chance to be pampered by Bai Qi. You also became a meditation cultivator. Did you devour some wind spirit? Because I didn't devour the wind spirit, I couldn't condense a nether body and recover my original appearance. If Big Brother didn't use the wind spirit to protect my soul and find a nether body to possess, I wouldn't have the chance to witness your retribution. Madame Blackpool said angrily. You weren't very pretty in your previous life, and even after you died, you still needed to find a beautiful body double. Women really do love to be beautiful. You should be thanking me, otherwise how could you have the chance to become so beautiful? Kim Tai laughed loudly, then turned to look at Bai Qi with a strange expression and said, Bai Qi, I find it strange. Although you are the emperor of the underworld, the king of the Black Mountain is your brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law colluded with your woman to rebel against you. What is going on? Bai Qi glanced at him and coldly said, You shut up. This slut is just a toy for me to vent my anger on. How can a piece of trash like her, who has been ridden by thousands and slept with tens of thousands, be worthy of being my woman? That's true. Jean Tai nodded his head seriously. Madame Blackpool was so angry that her body trembled. Big Brother. Help me catch him alive, help me catch him alive. Whoosh. The king of the Black Mountain staff paused for a moment, then he looked down and said, The emperor of the underworld and the immortal emperor have fallen to the point of using words. This means that they have reached the end of the road. Why do you care about it? Bai Qi. Hand over the obsidian hell light mirror, and I will spare your life. Bai Qi nodded silently. Both of you are eager to get the obsidian hell light mirror, so it seems that you already know the secret of the mirror. I can give it to you, but both of you want it, so who should I give it to? Kim Tai's eyes flickered as he looked at the mirror in his hand, trying to figure out the secret hidden within. Bai Qi. You don't need to sow discord between us. Madame Blackpool said disdainfully, I have no intention of fighting for power, I just want to be free and unfettered. Think about it, the emperor of the underworld will be my brother, and the immortal emperor of the immortal world will be my nephew. Where in the three realms won't I be free? The obsidian hell light mirror will naturally be given to my big brother. As soon as this was said, Kim Tai laughed wildly. After a while he said sternly, I am still here. Who in the immortal world dares to call himself an emperor? The immortal world has my son Wang Qing guarding it. Is there still a place for a stray dog like you? The king of the Black Mountain Wu Feng said indifferently, Today is the day you die. Ah, Wu Feng, I could kill you back then so I can still take care of you now. Kim Tai pointed at the two siblings with a ferocious expression. I was just worrying about how to deal with that madman Wang Qing. I didn't expect you two to deliver yourselves to me. I can capture you and use you as a hostage to force Wang Qing to submit. As he spoke, an illusory golden hand rushed out from the top of Kim Tai's head. With a whoosh, it grabbed the two siblings standing on the snake's head with lightning speed, instantly dispersing the dark clouds in the sky. Madame Blackpool was shocked. She teleported behind her brother. The king of the Black Mountain waved his staff casually. With a whoosh, a huge shadow appeared and struck forward like a pillar supporting the heavens. With a loud bang, a huge shockwave dispersed the dark clouds in the sky. The countless green snakes hidden in the dark clouds were revealed on the spot and scattered in all directions in fear. The golden hand shadow was instantly destroyed by the staff shadow. Kim Tai's body swayed slightly as he looked at the staff in the Black Mountain King's hand with a shocked expression. Bai Qi was also slightly shocked. He shone the obsidian hell light mirror in his hand towards the sky. Thousands of black lights burst out, wanting to strangle the two siblings in the sky in one fell swoop. The illusory huge staff shadow disappeared. Ding ling dang lang sounded hurriedly like the sound of a Sanskrit mantra resounding through the world. The staff in the Black Mountain King's hand stirred in the direction of the Minghuang Mountain. A dark whirlwind erupted from the tip of the staff and expanded. The black light shot by the obsidian hell light mirror was instantly absorbed by the dark whirlwind. At the same time, a powerful suction force was dragging the obsidian hell light mirror in Bai Qi's hand. The more he tried to use the black light to resist, the stronger the suction force became. It was as if the suction force was trying to take away his treasure. Bai Qi was shocked. He forcefully stopped the black light shot out from the mirror and quickly put away the obsidian hell light mirror. Kim Tai could naturally see that something was wrong. He stared at the sky and said in a deep voice, What a powerful treasure. It shouldn't be something unknown, but I've never heard of it. Bai Qi, have you heard of it? When did such a treasure appear in the three realms? I can see that he hasn't mastered it yet. It seems like he can't fully unleash the treasure's power. Bai Qi looked at the sky and shook his head in doubt, indicating that he didn't know either. The Black Mountain King in the sky was relieved after defeating their attacks. He laughed and said, "This treasure is an ancient god's treasure left in the Netherworld Palace by the coiling dragon god after he killed an ancient god called the Wind God. It's called the Wind God's Staff. Those who don't have the wind attribute can't use it. I happen to get it. This is heaven's will. Kim Tai. I bet you didn't even dream that I would get the ancient god's treasure. Ah, today is the day you die." The monk's staff in his hand clanked and dozens of earrings bounced. The dark whirlwind abruptly expanded into a sky-covering net, directly wrapping the entire Minghuang mountain in it. The sky-coiling whirlwind twisted and spun rapidly, changing the color of the sky and filling the entire space with whistling noises. Madame Blackpool, who was standing on the snake's head, took a few steps forward. She held one of the snake's horns and looked down at the Minghuang mountain that was covered by the whirlwind. She gritted her teeth and said, "Brother, leave Bai Qi alive for me to vent my anger." The Black Mountain King Wu Feng glanced at her and frowned slightly. However, he didn't say anything. He retracted the staff in his hand and put the end of the staff on the snake's head. The dozens of earrings on the 9 arcs of the staff kept spinning on their own. It was very strange. The people who were trapped on the Minghuang mountain turned pale with fright. It was as if they were trapped in endless darkness. The strong wind wrapped around them like sharp blades. The strong tearing force instantly pulled many people into it. Countless screams sounded. Those who were pulled into it were cut into pieces in the blink of an eye. Not even their bones could be seen. The soil and stones on the mountain were blown up like meteors, and there were rumbling sounds everywhere, forcing everyone to release their protective aura to resist. However, this increased the wind resistance, making it even more difficult to resist the strong wind. Those whose cultivation was not strong enough were swept away by the strong wind, leaving only screams and the whistling and ear-piercing hurricane. In just a few moments, almost all the people on the mountain were killed. Seeing this, Bai Qi's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. These were his trusted subordinates, whom he had spent countless years training. Suddenly he lost his elegant demeanor. He used all his strength to attack the approaching wind. Jin Tai and the others also attacked with all their strength. However, the treasures left behind by the ancient god were not to be underestimated. The endless power made their attacks disappear like clay oxen in the sea. They couldn't see any effect. Instead, they tended to increase the power of the wind. Jin Tai, didn't you say that the wind-riding art was a small trick? Where is the way to break it? Bai Qi turned around and shouted angrily. Jin Tai looked at the approaching wind and replied angrily, "This is not a normal wind-riding art. It is the power of the wind god magic treasure. How can I break it?" Huang Jia, who had lost all his subordinates, shouted angrily, "Your subordinate will open the way for the emperor of the underworld." The shield in his hand emitted a dazzling light, and he rushed toward the approaching wind with the shield. "Xingjun, come back. You can't stop it." Bai Qi reached out his hand and roared. His face was distorted. "Xingjun! Xingjun! Xingjun!" Silver-armored 1,000 soldiers and the others cried out involuntarily. They could only watch as Huang Jia, who was protected by a faint yellow light, desperately tried to resist the wind. However, the power of the wind was too strong. It was so strong that even Bai Qi and Jin Tai didn't dare to act rashly. How could he resist it? He resisted for a while in the strong wind. The yellow light on the shield became weaker and weaker. In the blink of an eye, it was completely blown away and the shield was forcibly blown away. Without the protection of the treasure, Xingjun was blown away like a thin piece of paper. He didn't even have time to scream before he was torn to pieces in front of everyone. He couldn't even keep his life, let alone open the way for the emperor of the underworld. Before the crowd had time to grieve, Jin Tai suddenly slapped his forehead and said, "There is change." The golden cloud rod in his hand suddenly grew bigger and bigger like a pillar supporting the sky. He stabbed directly into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the pillar that was several meters in diameter pierced through the wind and pierced the sky. A rapid sound of metal colliding came from the golden pillar. Chapter 1104. Everyone looked up and saw that the golden pillar had already started to be scratched by the fierce wind, and the entire pillar was also shaking violently. Jin Tai pressed his palm on the golden pillar, and a big hole appeared on the pillar. "Let's go. My golden cloud rod can't hold on for long." As soon as Kinte finished speaking, he had already turned into a golden light and flashed into the hole in the pillar. Bai Qi and the others followed closely behind. After entering, they found that the pillar was completely empty, forming an empty tube from the bottom to the top. They quickly followed the violently shaking tube and flashed out. As soon as they dashed out from the top of the pillar, they saw Jintai grab the golden pillar. The golden pillar shrunk quickly and returned to his hand from the center of the hurricane. They had escaped from the hurricane. Seeing what Jintai did, Bai Qi was shocked. He grabbed Jintai's clothes and shouted angrily, "What are you doing? More than 1,000 of my men haven't come out yet. Are you crazy?" Jintai pushed him away with his elbow. He picked up the battered golden cloud rod and said harshly, "The golden cloud rod can't hold on for long. It is already difficult for us to come out. We don't have time to wait for more than 1,000 of your men to escape." "Then why didn't you use it to escape earlier? Sheng Jun didn't have to die for nothing." Bai Qi, who was about to lose his mind, was pulled back by the silver-armored army and the others. They all advised him that as long as they could protect the Emperor of the Underworld, they would have a chance to avenge Sheng Jun. "If it weren't for Sheng Jun's death, I wouldn't have thought of using this method to escape. His death was worth it. Otherwise we would all die together." Jintai looked at the angry Bai Qi and snorted coldly, "Now is not the time for you to show mercy. We don't have a way to break the power of the divine wind staff yet. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to. If you don't leave, I will." On top of the giant snake's head that was floating in the air, Lady Blackpool was looking at the tornado that connected the sky and the earth. She praised her brother in amazement. The king of the Black Mountain, on the other hand, was looking at the tornado with a serious gaze. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky above the tornado. He said in a deep voice, "Not good. They actually managed to escape." Madame Blackpool was shocked. "What?" With a swoosh, the monk's staff in the hand of the king of the Black Mountain turned into a stream of light and shot into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a huge fellow that was several thousand feet tall, striking toward the top of the tornado with a force that could split the heavens and the earth. With such power, the people high up in the sky naturally noticed it as well. Kintai was the first to exclaim, "Not good. Let's go." Bai Qi and the others also teleported in a panic. A few streams of light quickly disappeared into the horizon. The staff missed its target, and the huge shadow of the staff floated in the air. Lady Blackpool said in surprise, "Big brother." The king of the Black Mountain looked at the sky and sighed. "They still managed to escape. Then why aren't you chasing after them?" Madame Blackpool said anxiously. The king of the Black Mountain shook his head and smiled bitterly, "It's useless. The reason I can defeat them is because of the power of the divine wind staff. In terms of cultivation, I'm far inferior to Bai Qi and Kintai, and in terms of speed, I'm also inferior to them. So, Wang Qing is still a little too impatient. I've already said that there's no need to rush. I'll wait until I understand more of the divine wind staff's abilities before I make a move. At that time, victory will be within my grasp. How can I let them escape and leave behind future troubles?" You can't blame Wang Qing for this. It is said that he has already noticed that Kintai is going to attack the Heartless Palace. He can't just sit there and wait for his death, so he naturally has to fight back. Even though she said that, Madame Blackpool's expression was somewhat regretful. After all, she had prepared for so many years, but in the end, she still had regrets. She was somewhat unwilling to accept this. He noticed that Kintai is going to attack him? Then why didn't we receive any news about it? This brat is looking down on me more and more. He didn't even discuss with me beforehand. The king of the Black Mountain's tone was somewhat heavy. I suspect that Wu Xiong's reckless actions aroused Jintai's suspicions. As for the specifics, it won't be too late to ask Wang Qing when we meet. As for why he didn't discuss it with you, I'm afraid. Madame Blackpool hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid it has something to do with the fact that you forced him to sever his relationship and remember his hatred. Is it wrong for me to ask him to take revenge for his mother? What else in the world is more important than avenging his parents? If I didn't force him to cultivate wholeheartedly, he wouldn't be able to defeat Kintai and Bai Qi and achieve such a glorious achievement today." The king of the Black Mountain's tone was stern. "If you can't forget your wife, why can't he do the same to his wife?" Madame Blackpool's words were in her mouth. Only she knew what she was saying, so she didn't dare to let her brother hear it. The siblings were being suspicious. Perhaps when they met up with Wang Qing, they would realize that the reason why things turned out like this was that Yu Qianqiu, who was not well known but was like a sh*t stirrer, played a big role in it. They didn't know if such a small character like him had harmed Kintai and Bai Qi or helped them. In short, he had caused the things that were about to happen to deviate from the original track. After the king of the Black Mountain calmed down, he grabbed at the sky and the whirlwind immediately stopped. The whirlwind turned into a ball of black wind and went back into the giant staff that was floating in the air. The towering Minghuang Mountain seemed to have lost half of its original size and looked straight and steep. The white light shield that was protecting the Minghuang Palace on the main peak was a little dim. The giant staff that was floating in the air plunged down like an avalanche. Boom! The ground shook and the white light shield collapsed instantly. The Minghuang Palace suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The giant staff then turned back into the original tin staff and flashed back to the king of the Black Mountain's hand. Madame Blackpool's eyes lit up when she saw the Minghuang Palace on the main peak. She waved her sleeves and pointed at the Minghuang Palace. The giant snake under her feet let out a deafening roar and carried the two of them to the Minghuang Palace quickly. Before they reached the top of the mountain, Madame Blackpool couldn't wait to get down. The king of the Black Mountain waved his hand, and a bald man in black clothes flashed over. His bald head was shiny and his big eyes had no eyebrows. A ferocious glint could be seen in his eyes. He cupped his hands and said in a hoarse voice, "My king. Send my order to search for the whereabouts of Bai Qi Jintai and the others. Report to me as soon as you have any definite information." The king of the Black Mountain yelled. The bald man in black clothes replied respectfully, "Yes," and left quickly. The emperor of the underworld was defeated, and the morale of the people was disrupted. The troops who came to rescue the emperor from all directions either surrendered or ran away. Another fierce battle ensued. However, the outcome had been determined. Unless the emperor of the underworld came back again, he wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble. In the deep wood forest, Madame Blackpool's hysterical laughter suddenly came from the small attic where the emperor of the underworld lived. She laughed so happily. When the king of the Black Mountain heard the laughter and dashed in, Madame Blackpool was already lying on the rocking chair by the window. Her eyes were slightly closed and she rocked the chair leisurely with a smile on her face. She murmured, "Bai Qi, help me massage my feet." The king of the Black Mountain was startled by her words. He looked around quickly but he didn't find Bai Qi. After a while, he realized that his younger sister was daydreaming. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Is this the building where Bai Qi lives? He glanced at the arrangement of the desk and the bookshelf full of scrolls. Unexpectedly, Madame Blackpool didn't answer his question with her eyes closed. "Big brother. The deep wood forest and this attic belong to me. You can handle the rest as you see fit." She rocked on the chair with a comfortable expression on her face. The king of the Black Mountain was speechless as he put away his staff. He walked to the desk and saw a scroll on it. He pushed it away and rolled it on the table. The scroll showed a scene of a green-robed elder fighting against 4 netherworld generals and Bai Qi alone. The painting was so exquisite and realistic that even the king of the Black Mountain couldn't help but reveal an expression of admiration. He said, "It seems that this Bai Qi who always dresses like a scholar is not just pretending to be an elegant person. The standard of the painting is quite high. If I can catch him and make him my male toy, it would be good to keep him for my painting." Madame Blackpool murmured with her eyes closed. She seemed to be crazy. The king of the Black Mountain frowned and glanced at her. His eyes stopped on the old man in green robe in the painting. He said in a deep voice, "This person must be Bai Changchun who fought with Wang Qing in the Immortal Palace. This person is a loner. I don't know what his intentions are. I don't know whether he is a friend or a foe." Madame Blackpool twisted her body comfortably. She tilted her head and opened her eyes. She smiled at him and said, "So what if he is Bai Changchun? Big brother, you have the divine wind staff. Do you still need to be afraid of him? Even so, this person must not be underestimated." The king of the Black Mountain said with a serious expression, "The king of the Black Mountain can't enter the underworld forbidden land. Even I can't do anything with the power of the divine wind staff. However, this person can enter and exit the forbidden land. Who dares to underestimate him?" Suddenly he seemed to think of something. He looked around and said, "Rumor has it that the mysterious underworld saintess also lives in the deep wood forest. Why didn't I notice anyone else here?" "Her?" Madame Blackpool suddenly stood up. She gritted her teeth and said, "That bitch is always playing tricks. She doesn't take me seriously every time I see her. Only Bai Qi would fall for her tricks. He even named her the underworld saintess. She lives in the back. It's a good time to get even with her." After saying that, he directly flashed out of the window, flew across the forest, and landed in the small courtyard with low walls made of jade. Looking around and seeing that there was no one around, He immediately rushed into the house, not letting go of a single corner to search. The king of the Black Mountain followed closely behind her. He looked around and finally, his eyes fell on the smooth black sand on the ground. He picked up a handful of sand and rubbed it in his hand. He frowned and said to himself, "Crushed spiritual stones?" His eyes instinctively stared at the grindstone under the eaves. Madame Blackpool searched the house and quickly went to the deep wood forest outside to search everywhere. Later, she sent people to search the entire dark imperial palace. However, she still couldn't find the underworld saintess. When she returned to the small courtyard with a gloomy face, she saw the king of the Black Mountain standing next to the grindstone under the eaves. He held a jade archive in his hand and said nothing. Chapter 1105. When we were about to make our move, I sent people to keep an eye on Minghuang Mountain. I didn't want this bitch to escape. Madame Blackpool walked under the eaves and said angrily, "I searched everywhere but I couldn't find her. Where is she hiding? There's no need to look for her. She left a long time ago." The king of the Black Mountain, who had been silent, suddenly sighed. He handed over the jade archive in his hand and said, "She left this on the grindstone before she left. She left it for you. Take a look." Left a long time ago? Could it be that she can really predict the future? Madame Blackpool took the jade archive with a puzzled look. It read, "Since I want to steal the host's place, I will leave early. Wu Yunfang, don't worry about me." It was just a few words, but Madame Blackpool's face darkened. She smashed the jade archive into pieces and looked around. "You must be hiding in Minghuang Palace. I will find you." "How do you know she is hiding in Minghuang Palace?" The Black Mountain King frowned. "Do I need to ask?" Madame Blackpool said angrily, "Ever since our bodies were destroyed in the immortal realm, you have never called my name in the underworld. How could she know that my real name is Wu Yunfang? It's obvious that she heard the conversation between us and Jin Tai. That's why she knows that I'm called Wu Yunfang. But now she's deliberately mystifying us. She wants to confuse us so that she can escape. I won't let her succeed so easily." "Calm down. Bai Qi is not an ordinary person. If Bai Qi can call her the underworld saintess, she must have something special about her." The king of the Black Mountain carefully looked around the simple furnishings in the courtyard, as well as the black sand that was ground by spirit stones, and slowly said, "I've long heard that this underworld saintess is proficient in the art of divination. Maybe she really is a prophet." "You believe this nonsense? If she really can predict the future, Bai Qi wouldn't have been defeated today, and he wouldn't have let me live until now." Madame Blackpool said through gritted teeth, "That bitch can only fool that bookworm Bai Qi with her tricks. She can't fool me. Even if I have to turn the entire Minghuang Mountain upside down, I'm going to find that bitch." As soon as she finished speaking, Madame Blackpool left in a hurry again. The king of Black Mountain frowned and shook his head. He entered the underworld saintess's house and carefully observed the decorations inside. Several streams of light flew quietly in the sky above the netherworld. They were Jin Tai, Bai Qi and the others. Everyone's expressions were ugly. The most uncomfortable ones were Jin Tai and Bai Qi. The two of them had ruled the immortal and netherworld for so many years. First there was Bai Changchun, then there was Wang Qin, and now there was the king of Black Mountain. When did the immortal emperor and netherworld emperor become so easy to bully? In the end, we have been living a comfortable life for too long. Otherwise, we wouldn't have suffered such a defeat. If we were prepared, these people wouldn't be able to do anything. We were too careless. Qintai suddenly let out a long sigh and looked back. After confirming that no one was chasing after them, he gestured to everyone and took the lead to hide in a rocky stream below. The rest of them also followed him down there. Only Jin Tai, Bai Qi, Chen Jun, Ao Jun and Tian Jun were left in the stream of rocks. None of Bai Qi's subordinates escaped. They were all killed by the divine wind staff. Bai Qi was still angry at Jin Tai. He didn't respond to Jin Tai's words along the way. Jin Tai knew that Bai Qi blamed him for not rescuing his trusted subordinate, Huangjia Xingjun, in time. Jin Tai released his divine sense to scan the surrounding area. After making sure no one was around, he sneered at Bai Qi, "You are too soft-hearted. No wonder you raised that bitch Blackpool. Raising that bitch can at least please me in bed. It's better than you helping Black Mountain raise Wu Xiong's eldest son." Bai Qi immediately retorted. Silver Armor and Chen Jun, who were immersed in sorrow, couldn't help but look at Jin Tai. Jin Tai Ning was speechless. He glanced at Bai Qi's subordinates. To be honest, he was actually quite envious of Bai Qi. He had long wanted to ask Bai Qi for advice on how he could bring out such a group of loyal subordinates who were willing to die. However, he could not bring himself to do so. Is there any point in saying this now? We are really stray dogs now. Let's think about how to turn things around first. Jintai glanced at the storage bracelet on Bai Qi's hand and lightly said, "What is the secret of your obsidian light mirror? Why are Wu Feng and his sister so eager to get it? If there is a secret that can help us turn things around, why don't you say it now? What is there to hide now?" Although Bai Qi was angry, he also knew that now was not the time to fight. It was better to work together and discuss a good plan. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Obsidian Light Mirror's original name is not this. There is a record left by Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld God's Palace. It is called Yin-Yang Mirror." Jintai's eyes immediately lit up. How can the treasure mentioned by Coiling Dragon be easy to obtain? Is it because you can't use the power of this treasure? Otherwise, how could you block the Divine Wind Staff? It is true that I can't use the power of this treasure, but the true power of this Yin-Yang Mirror is not reflected in fighting. Bai Qi glanced at Silver Armor Army and the others. They were all his trusted subordinates, so there was nothing to hide. He immediately said with a solemn expression, "According to the records of Coiling Dragon, the Yin-Yang Mirror can see through the two realms of Yin and Yang, and control the cycle of life and death. It is said that those who can use the power of this treasure can see anyone's fate and reincarnation. In other words, it can show you who you reincarnated from in your previous life. It can also control what you reincarnate into in your next life, whether it is a human, a dog, a pig, a cow, and so on." When they heard this, they were all shocked. They didn't think that there would be such a treasure. It was a little too magical. Jintai was stunned. "This? I'm afraid even a divine weapon can't use such a miraculous effect. It can see through the yin and yang and control the cycle of life and death. This treasure is too heaven-defying. I don't know whether a divine weapon has such a miraculous effect or not, but according to the records of Coiling Dragon, this treasure is even older than a divine weapon. It is a treasure that was born when the two realms of yin and yang were still in chaos. Later, because this mirror absorbed the yin eye and yang eye of yin and yang could not see each other, so they could not mix together. Thus, yin and yang were separated, creating the two realms of yin and yang. It is said that this mirror represents the yin-yang eye. This is too mysterious and too profound. I still don't understand what it means." Bai Qi shook his head and sighed. Older than a divine weapon. Jintai's throat moved slightly, and a trace of greed flashed in his eyes. Bai Qi saw this and coldly snorted, "Unfortunately, this thing fell in the underworld when the two realms of yin and yang were divided, so it is destined to be a treasure of the underworld. Jintai, don't let your imagination run wild. Even if this thing is given to you, you have no way to control it. In your hands, it is less than a piece of scrap iron." "Nonsense, when did I let my imagination run wild?" Jintai's expression did not change and his heart did not jump as he said, "I am just curious. Although this treasure is magical, it is actually a bit weak. In terms of power, it is not even comparable to the Wind God staff in Wu Feng's hands. Why are the Wu siblings so anxious to get it? This is mainly because of the words of Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld God Palace. He said that only those who can wield the Yin-Yang Mirror are worthy of being the ruler of the underworld." Bai Qi revealed a trace of a bitter smile and slightly shook his head. "It is because of this insignificant sentence. Coiling Dragon once controlled the entire Styx, and was the main god that the Styx's water race worshipped. And those old fellows in the Netherworld God Palace who desired to ascend to the divine realm took the words left behind by Coiling Dragon as a divine decree, making people helpless. Jintai. Now you should understand why this obsidian light mirror is so important, right?" Jintai pondered for a while and then nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. I used to think it was strange that the water race of the Styx's united forces were so powerful, and they had so many masters, but they never interfered with the rule of the underworld emperors of the past. This was somewhat illogical. It turned out that the underworld emperors of the past had the obsidian light mirror, which is also known as the yin-yang mirror. To put it bluntly, those old fellows from the Netherworld Divine Palace are just flattering the Coiling Dragon god. In short, it's not because this mirror is powerful, but because it represents the teachings of the Coiling Dragon god." "Exactly. This is what it means. This obsidian light mirror is the symbol of the ruler of the underworld. No matter who sat on the throne of the underworld emperor of the underworld, if they did not have this obsidian light mirror, they could not be considered a true emperor of the underworld. Once they had a conflict with the water race of the Styx, or provoked the old fellows in the Netherworld God Palace, if they could not take out the obsidian light mirror to control the situation, they would not give face to the emperor of the underworld. It is estimated that no one could sit firmly on the throne of the Underworld Emperor. This was the reason why the Wu siblings were anxious to get the Obsidian Light Mirror. Without the Yin-Yang Mirror, they did not have the right to truly rule the Underworld. At this point he could not help but look at the vast netherworld. The night wind blew and he did not know if he could get back what he had lost today. He smiled slightly bitterly. In fact, I think that only the past emperors of the Underworld who had wielded the Obsidian Light Mirror could truly understand the true meaning of Coiling Dragon's teachings. Coiling Dragon said that only those who could wield the Yin-Yang Mirror were worthy to be the ruler of the Underworld. It did not mean that anyone who had the Yin-Yang Mirror could be the ruler of the Underworld. The keyword was wield the Yin-Yang Mirror, meaning that only those who could truly use the power of the Yin-Yang Mirror could be the ruler of the Underworld. Everyone had misunderstood Coiling Dragon's meaning. But these words, to those who regarded Coiling Dragon's teachings as the decree of God, if you could not take out solid evidence to convince them, if you dared to speak nonsense, they would probably regard it as tampering with the decree and then beat you to death. Chapter 1106. Hearing this, Silver Armor Army and the other two showed an expression of understanding. They had learned something new. Jin Tai, on the other hand, had lost interest in the Obsidian Light Mirror because it was of no use to him. He didn't have the mood to get entangled in such a topic. To him, nothing was more important than regaining control of the immortal world. His eyes flickered as he said, "Bai Qi, can this Obsidian Light Mirror get the help of the experts of the Styx's water race and the old fellows of the Netherworld Spirit Estate to help us regain what belongs to us? I hope the Obsidian Light Mirror has that ability, but do you think it's possible?" Bai Qi said with a mocking expression. The Coiling Dragon gods didn't say that they have to listen to the command of the Yin-Yang Mirror's wielder. Do you really think they're fools? They're all a bunch of old fools. They're not as stupid as you. If the Obsidian Light Mirror could really command the entire Netherworld, I'm afraid it wouldn't have fallen into my hands. Those old fellows would have come out of the mountains to snatch it, and I wouldn't be with you until today. Let's use our brains and find another way out. Jin Tai thought about it and said with some anger, "Then what do you think we should do? Are we supposed to hide here forever? Staying here isn't a long-term solution. We'll be discovered sooner or later. We have to find a safe place to settle down first, then think of a way to deal with that Wu Feng and his family." Want to find a safe place to settle down? Where is there a safe place for us to settle down now? Bai Qi sneered. How about the Netherworld Spirit Estate? You have the Obsidian Light Mirror, those old fellows shouldn't stop you from finding a place to settle down there. Jin Tai said naturally. Bai Qi nodded. It will help us settle down, but don't forget, Wu Feng was able to bring out the Wind God staff from the Netherworld Spirit Estate. That means he can also enter and exit the Netherworld Spirit Estate. Although we don't know the reason, it's very likely that he has a close relationship with one of the almighty beings inside. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to safely bring out a treasure like the Wind God staff. In this situation, do you still dare to take this risk? Qintai's expression froze and he said helplessly, "We can't stop Wang Qing's sword drawing style in the immortal world, and the underworld can't beat his father's Wind God staff. However, we didn't dare to rashly step into the human world as we were afraid of incurring the wrath of the heavens. The golden lightning that filled the sky still gave me lingering fear. It was too frightening. It's a pity that it's not time for the divine ruin realm to open yet. Otherwise, after we enter, we can join hands to seal the passageway, and when the time is right, we can open the passageway to take revenge. We probably can't win against Wu Feng even if we go to the Netherworld God Manor, and we can't enter the forbidden area of the underworld. Don't tell me there's no place for us to stand within the several realms? How did we end up like this? It's all your fault. If you hadn't eradicated the Wind Evolution sect back then, would there be such trouble today? However, that ghost world forbidden land." Bai Qi said thoughtfully, "I wonder what method that Bai Changchun used to enter and exit the mysterious forbidden land. Speaking of which, if we can rope in Bai Changchun's help, who knows, maybe that old brat's amazing skills can break the divine wind staff." Bai Changchun? Do you think that's possible? You almost killed him back then, and he kept saying in the Immortal Palace that he would take my life in the future. There's no way to resolve the grievances between us. At this moment, Kim Tae realized that he seemed to have pushed him too far. He couldn't find a way out. His face gradually became ferocious as he said, "If you push me too far, then don't blame me for being impolite." Bai Qi dragged out the last syllable and said with some disdain, "How can you be impolite? It's already come to this, are you still being polite to them? Why can't I see that?" Jin Tai said with a savage expression, Open all the demon realm seals in the immortal and netherworld, and the 72 realms of the human world. Open the 74 demon realm passageways that the demon god opened back then. Even if you can't open them all, just opening one is enough. I'm sure that the 3 knights will seize the opportunity to lead the heroes of the demon world to the 3 realms again. Demon King 3 Knights. The silver-armored army, purple-armored army, and blue-armored celestial army all cried out in shock. "You're crazy." Bai Qi was very moved as he said sternly, "Back then we spent a great deal of effort to seal the 3 knights and his group of demons in the demon world. Once you open the demon world, the 3 realms will once again fall into the hands of the demon Dao. Who in the 3 realms can be the 3 knights' opponent?" Back then even those old fellows in the Netherworld God Palace had to think twice and didn't dare to provoke them. So many years have passed, have you thought about how terrifying the 3 knights is now? Let's not talk about this for now. Back then it was you and I who used to scheme to seal them. When the 3 knights comes out, the first thing he will do is seek revenge on us. At that time, there really will be no path to heaven or door to hell. Jintai was silent for a while. From his abnormally serious gaze, it could be seen that he was also very afraid of the Demon King 3 Knights. After thinking for a while, he looked at Bai Qi and asked indifferently, "If we are forced into a corner and the 3 Knights is willing to let us go and save us, are you willing to open the Demon Realm passageway and let the 3 Knights out?" "The 3 Knights will let us go and save us? Don't talk nonsense. That's impossible. We sealed them for so many years, and they want nothing more than to swallow us alive. How could they let us go?" Bai Qi suddenly raised his hand and said sternly, "Let's stop here. I will not agree to open the demon world again. Let's not talk about this anymore. We should think of another way. Actually, if you really force me to that point, you should know that I can open the seal of the demon world by myself. I don't need your permission." Jintai stared straight at Bai Qi and said slowly, "Back then, after sealing the demon world, you took a piece of cloth stained with the blood of the 3 knights and said that you have a secret technique to communicate with the 3 knights of the demon world through the blood on the cloth. Presumably you weren't lying at that time." Bai Qi sneered, "You want me to communicate with the 3 knights of the demon world and negotiate with him on the condition that he let us go and help us, and we open the demon realm passageway to release him?" "That's right. That's right." Jintai nodded. Bai Qi raised his hand and pointed at his own head. With a face full of ridicule he said, "Use your brain and think about it. Even you, Lady Jean, go back on your word and have no integrity to speak of. Could it be that you dare place your hopes on San Yi to keep his word? He can easily agree and deal with you after he comes out." Jintai calmly said, "We can make him swear on the demon god curse. From the 1 Night Demon Monarch to the 2nd Night Demon Monarch to the 3rd Night Demon Monarch, they are all direct descendants of the demon god. They worship their ancestor the demon god to the extreme. As long as the 3 knights swears on the demon god, he will not dare to violate the oath and blaspheme the demon god. We can use this to negotiate the conditions. What is there to be afraid of? Of course, unless the 3 knights is willing to be trapped in the demon world and not come out. In that case there is nothing we can do. But I'm sure he wants to come out." Bai Qi shook his head, "You're crazy. With the passage of time, if the 3 knights doesn't take the oath seriously, I can't imagine how miserable your death will be. I know this method is very risky, but if we are forced into a dead end we will die either way. Since there is a glimmer of hope, why don't we try it? At least if we die we can drag them down with us. No one will have an easy time. Just think of it as revenge. There is nothing bad about it." Jintai said with a self-mocking tone, "What do you think? Don't you want to take revenge for the Huang Jiasheng army?" The 3 silver-armored soldiers looked at each other, then at the emperor of the underworld they were loyal to. Bai Qi fell into silence. After a while his eyebrows twitched. It was unknown what he thought of, but he looked at Jintai up and down and said, "Jintai, you are actually a gold spirit. This is really surprising. Could it be that your physical body is made of gold? If that is the case, then you will be invincible? You have played with so many women. If you take Ji Wu as your wife, can she help you reproduce?" Hearing this, Jintai's face instantly changed. With a twisted expression he said sternly, "Bai Qi, I am talking to you about serious matters." If it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid of being discovered, he would have shouted it out loud. "Don't misunderstand, I am talking about serious matters." Bai Qi continued to ask in a curious tone, "As far as I know, there are 5 great spirits in this world. Since you are a gold spirit, then there should be other spirits. Do you not have a way to contact them for help?" "Bai Qi, you still dare to mention Jintai's angry face froze. Suddenly he clenched his fists and said, "How could I forget about him? If we can find him for help, we might be able to solve the problem." "Who? Is he also one of the 5 great spirits?" Bai Qi's eyes lit up. The 3 silver-armored soldiers' eyes also lit up when they heard that there was hope to solve the problem. Jintai squinted his eyes and said, "That old thing always appears and disappears mysteriously, but he is indeed a capable person. At least he is stronger than me. It is just that he is used to staying aloof from worldly affairs. I don't know if we can find him." Saying this, he suddenly turned around and said, "Let's go. We will return to the immortal world and go to the ancient forest of Wood Immortal Province. Maybe we can find him there." "Okay." Bai Qi nodded. The silver-armored soldiers was startled. He quickly cupped his fists and said in a low voice, "Emperor of the Underworld, we have contacted Zhang Jun. The Purgatory Army was attacked by a large number of people. Now they are all dead. Zhang Jun led a few of his subordinates to escape and found a chance to send a message to us. He asked where to meet us. Should we ask him to go directly to the immortal world?" Bai Qi slowly turned around and looked at his 3 subordinates. He tightly pursed his lips for a while. Then he secretly took out a crystal-clear ice talisman and stuffed it into the silver-armored soldier's hands. He transmitted his voice to the 3 silver-armored soldiers at the same time. "I don't know what will happen if I go there. If there is trouble, it is not difficult for me to escape with my cultivation. But it is too dangerous for you to go with me. Remember what I said, change your appearances and sneak to the Great Snow Mountain. Let Zhang Jun meet you there." Chapter 1107. In the rocky stream there was no moonlight, but there was a cool breeze. Jin Taiwei glanced at them and guessed that they wanted to go their separate ways. With the current situation, this was not something he wanted to see. If he brought a few more people with him, they would be able to block the enemy at a critical moment. This was especially true for Bai Qi's loyal and brave subordinates, who were willing to sacrifice themselves to block the enemy at a critical moment. Even if they couldn't block the enemy, it would still be good if they could delay the enemy for a while. "Bai Qi, take Qianjun and the others with you. We can take care of each other." Jin Tai interrupted with ulterior motives. Bai Qi glanced at him coldly and continued to transmit his voice to his 3 subordinates. "The Snow Empress and her husband owe me a favor, and I trust their characters. Therefore, I've been saving this favor as a backup plan, and I haven't told anyone and I haven't let anyone know about it. I'm preparing to use it at a critical moment. Now the situation is not in our favor. I vaguely feel that this matter is a bit sudden. There are too many factors involved in it. This matter should not be so simple. I am afraid that it will not end well. You have followed me for many years. Unfortunately, I have nothing left for you. I only hope that I can protect you as much as possible. After you reach the Great Snow Mountain, take out this ice talisman and ask for protection. The Snow Empress and her husband will arrange a place for you. Although the cultivation of the Snow Empress and her husband is not very strong, they have the Great Snow Mountain to rely on. Not many people have the ability to break into the Great Snow Mountain and make things difficult for them. Unless someone can destroy the Great Snow Mountain that has existed for countless years, even if the Snow Empress and her husband are no match for them, they should have no problem to hide. In addition, they have 800,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers under their command. With their protection, you should be very safe in the Great Snow Mountain." Seeing that they were eager to express their opinions, Bai Qi raised his hand to stop them. "Don't say anything else. Listen to my arrangements. Now that they've revealed all their trump cards, I'm already prepared. At the very least, there isn't anyone in the 3 realms that can stop me if I want to flee. I'm just going to see if there's any room to turn the situation around. If it's possible, I'll naturally summon all of you to help me. If it doesn't work, I won't go to my death. I'll go to the Great Snow Mountain to look for you. That's settled, you can go." Waving his hand at the 3 of them, he resolutely turned around and snorted at Kim Tae, whose eyes were flickering with uncertainty. "Let's go." The Silver Armor Army, the Purple Armor Army, and the Blue Armor Army all knelt down on one knee in unison. They tried their best to suppress their excitement as they saluted, "Farewell, Underworld Emperor." When they raised their heads again, the figure in front of them had already disappeared, and 2 flowing lights, one gold and one white, disappeared on the horizon. A flying shuttle was flying toward the Minghuang Mountain at a moderate speed. Along the way they would occasionally bump into large groups or small groups of people chasing and killing each other, making them feel that the netherworld was already in chaos. Nie Xiaoqian and the others didn't want to encounter any trouble on the way, so they had already changed their conspicuous golden robes. The flying shuttle didn't dare to fly too fast. Firstly, it was afraid of attracting too much attention. Secondly, Nie Xiaoqian and the others were constantly observing their surroundings. Because they didn't know Kim Tae's exact location, they couldn't communicate with him through voice transmissions, so they could only rely on their eyesight to carefully search for him. None of this had anything to do with Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was still using his old habits, sitting at the back of the group and thinking about his own matters. In the end, she actually walked to the back of the group and sat next to Yu Qianqiu. However, what made him depressed was that Qingyang kept glancing at him from time to time. What was even more excessive was that she didn't seem to enjoy looking at him from afar. In the end, she leisurely walked to the back and bent down to sit next to Yu Qianqiu. This immediately attracted everyone's attention. From time to time, everyone would glance behind them. This was because everyone who knew Qingyang knew that this woman didn't care about ordinary men at all, let alone sitting next to a stranger. In this way, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. From time to time, they would look back because those who knew Qingyang all knew that this woman didn't care about ordinary men at all, let alone a stranger who was sitting shoulder to shoulder with her. Especially Nie Xiaoqian's eyes, which were unscrupulously looking back and forth between the two of them, were full of suspicion. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on pins and needles, had a vague feeling that Qingyang might have recognized him, but for some reason she couldn't be sure. After all, the two of them had been dancing together for a few days. Not only were they very familiar with each other's body shape, eyes and ears, they could even recognize each other's body odor. After thinking this through, Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. Since he had already started, he decided to just go with the flow. He moved his body to the side, not letting Qingyang see his face, and lied down, pretending to sleep. In the end, he really did fall asleep. His dreams were filled with scenes of him and Qingyang dancing naked in the Green Pear Palace and being scolded by her. After an unknown amount of time, the speed of the flying shuttle suddenly decreased. Yu Qianqiu immediately woke up from his muddle-headedness. Hearing the sounds of fierce fighting, he immediately sat up. Nie Xiaoqian quickly walked forward and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" And Gao, who was driving the flying shuttle, pointed forward and said, "There are thousands of people fighting in front of us. Should we go around them?" Everyone looked over and saw a wide canyon between two towering mountains in front of them. Thousands of people were fighting in the canyon. The group that had the advantage in numbers looked like the Netherworld's Dark Nether Army from their clothes. The battle looked more like a siege battle between the Dark Nether Army and the Dark Nether Army. Let's avoid the Dark Nether Army as much as possible. Nie Xiaoqian thought for a moment, then waved her hand and pointed at the towering mountain on the left, saying, "Go around the mountain on the left." And Gao obeyed and quickly drove the flying shuttle to the mountain on the left. When the battle in the canyon disappeared from everyone's sight, the flying shuttle had just gone around the back of the mountain and was about to speed up, but suddenly, a streak of light flew over from the mountain and blocked the flying shuttle's path. The flying shuttle abruptly stopped. A woman in black with shoulder-length hair and half her face covered by a veil was blocking the way. Her deep gaze swept across everyone, causing everyone to become vigilant. Yu Qianqiu also quickly stood up. However, the people in front of him blocked his line of sight, so he naturally stepped on the horizontal board at the end of the shuttle that he had just been sitting on. He raised his head to take a look, but unexpectedly, his eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. His head shrank back and he quickly sat back down. Qingyang, who was sitting next to him, frowned and stared at the place where he had just stepped on. It seemed that she was not used to his country bumpkin style. The black-clothed woman in front of them looked at Nie Xiaoqian's face and said indifferently, "So it's the Immortal Palace's chief steward Nie. Long time no see." Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nie Xiaoqian. Nie Xiaoqian was slightly startled and seemed to remember something. She quickly cupped her hands in surprise and said, "So it's the Saintess. Saintess, why are you here?" Based on everyone's experience, they immediately guessed that the person who had just arrived was the mysterious woman that the Underworld Emperor Bai Qi had called the Saintess of the Underworld. They couldn't help but look at her with great surprise. Qingyang was also curious to see what this legendary Saintess of the Underworld looked like. However, when she tilted her head slightly, she found that Yu Qianqiu was sitting motionlessly like an old monk in meditation. She suppressed the urge to stand up and take a look. Most of the people present had never seen the Saintess of the Underworld before, so it was not strange that they didn't recognize her. However, when Nie Xiaoqian followed Jin Tai to fight the Myriad Swords demon monarch in the human world, she had seen the Saintess of the Underworld several times. She had seen the immortal Emperor Jin Tai and the Underworld Emperor Bai Qi treat this mysterious woman with respect. With Jean Tai's arrogant attitude, even he had to be respectful, so she naturally didn't dare to be disrespectful. The saintess quietly replied, "I will wait here for the underworld emperor's arrival." Her gaze swept across everyone's faces as if she was examining something. Everyone looked at each other, but Nie Xiaoqian revealed a joyful expression and said, "Saintess, you mean to say that the underworld emperor will pass by this place?" The reason for her happiness was very simple. With the situation at this point, the underworld emperor and the immortal emperor would definitely be together. If the underworld emperor came, then the immortal emperor would naturally come as well. The saintess didn't reply to her. Instead, she lightly approached the flying shuttle and floated to the side of the flying shuttle. She looked at everyone with a scrutinizing gaze. Just as she was feeling a little disappointed, she suddenly saw a man and a woman nestled at the back of the flying shuttle. The woman was curiously looking at her while the man was sneaking glances at her from time to time like a thief, as if he was afraid of her approaching. The saintess' gaze paused on Yu Qianqiu's face for a moment, then she looked at everyone again. In the end, she didn't find the person she was looking for. Just as she was about to turn around and leave with a strange frown, she suddenly exclaimed in surprise. She abruptly turned around and looked at Yu Qianqiu again. Her eyes slightly emitted a strange black splendor, and her pair of eyes seemed to become even more profound. "Bitch, have you never seen a man before?" Yu Qianqiu looked down at the floor and cursed in his heart. The black splendor in the saintess' eyes suddenly disappeared. She looked at Yu Qianqiu in a daze and no one knew what she was thinking. No one else knew, but her mouth slightly formed a circle under the black veil. Everyone's gaze kept moving between her and Yu Qianqiu. They didn't know what the saintess was trying to do. Only the great bright wheel's heart began to race. After the saintess' misty eyes returned to normal, she lightly floated to the back of the flying shuttle. Yu Qianqiu, who had his head lowered, suddenly noticed that there was a pair of black boots in front of him. Moreover, it was the style of a woman. He couldn't help but slowly raise his head, and his eyes met with the slightly lowered head of the saintess. Yu Qianqiu's expression stiffened. He coughed and pretended to casually tilt his head to the left. However, he discovered that Qingyang was staring at him with wide eyes. It was obvious that he was looking in the wrong direction. Thus, he coughed again and tilted his head to the right, pretending to look at the pitch-black scenery outside. Chapter 1108. However, to everyone's surprise, the netherworld saintess raised her leg and gently nudged his leg, indicating for him to sit a little further in. Yu Qianqiu raised his head in surprise and obediently moved his butt in. As a result, he bumped into Qingyang's butt. The netherworld saintess' name caused Qingyang to cooperate and move her butt further out. Finally, there was a small empty space at the end of the shuttle, and the netherworld saintess sat down without any hesitation. What did it mean to be on pins and needles? Yu Qianqiu now had another understanding of the situation. The situation was like this. There were 3 people in the small space and 2 women were sandwiching a man in the middle. In fact, the 2 women knew him and he also knew the 2 women. However, he had changed his appearance and wanted to pretend that he didn't know the 2 women. However, the 2 women seemed to recognize him, and he had to pretend that he didn't know them. Thus, the 2 women began to push him left and right. There was also a group of people watching the show with surprised expressions. They thought that he had done something to the 2 women, but in fact, he hadn't done anything to them. Nie Xiaoqian and the others looked at the 3 people in the back with suspicious eyes. They couldn't figure out what the 3 people were doing. Could it be that there was a place with good feng shui behind them? Or could it be that Niu Yu's charm was limitless, and women fell in love at first sight? Even if it was a place with good feng shui, even if Niu Yu's charm was limitless, there was no need to do this in front of everyone, right? Yu Qianqiu straightened his back and sat there motionlessly. At this moment, he couldn't find even the slightest bit of feeling like he was hugging a woman on his left and right. There were still faint sounds of fighting coming from the canyon on the other side of the mountain, but aside from the sound of the wind, it was eerily quiet here. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Qianqiu swallowed with difficulty. Just as he was about to stand up, a hand suddenly reached out from his right and stopped him from getting up. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and saw that the underworld saintess was looking at him with a profound gaze. He immediately confirmed that the other party had recognized him. Hence, his shoulders and waist slumped as he shamelessly sat between the 2 women. Who's afraid of who? After a while, Nie Xiaoqian walked through the crowd and came to the back. She cupped her hands to the saintess of the underworld and asked, "Saintess, are you going to wait here for the underworld emperor?" The netherworld saintess nodded slightly and didn't say anything. Nie Xiaoqian said, "I understand." She looked at her daughter again and didn't know what she was doing. She then turned around and gave the others a look. Everyone turned around and didn't want to watch anymore. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the pressure on him lessen significantly. He tilted his head to look at the netherworld saintess and transmitted his voice respectfully. "Saintess, what is your intention in doing this?" The saintess of the underworld also tilted her head to look at him and sent him a telepathic message. "Yu Qianqiu, you are so capricious. You were dressed like a barbarian before. I almost didn't recognize you. I almost let you go for nothing." Yu Qianqiu refused to admit his mistake. "Saintess, have you mistaken me for someone else? My name is Niu Yid, not Yu Qianqiu." The underworld saintess blinked her eyes and said, "You can hide it from others, but how can you hide it from me? You should know that I am proficient in divination and can see many things that others can't. How can your little tricks fool my eyes? Do you want me to expose your true colors in front of everyone?" "No wonder you are the saintess of the underworld. I can't fool you." Yu Qianqiu snorted. He was a little displeased by the other party's belittling and threatening words. "It's not a big deal to be proficient in divination. Take me for example. Although I am also proficient in divination, I always keep a low profile and never show it off in front of others. I think it's meaningless to do so. To put it bluntly, it's just vulgar." "Oh, from what you said, it seems that you are also proficient in divination. I really can't see it. If there is a chance, I want to see it." The saintess of the underworld's tone was somewhat sarcastic. Yu Qianqiu had set a trap for her to fall into. He expected that she would say this, so he asked, "If you really want to see it, I can show you a few of my skills since there is nothing to do now. I'm just afraid that it will scare you." "Scare me? Not to that extent. I will wait and see." The saintess of the underworld looked around as if she wanted to choose someone for Yu Qianqiu to read their fortune. Unexpectedly, she found that her hand was grabbed by someone. She looked back coldly and saw Yu Qianqiu rubbing one of her hands. He even had a greasy smile on his face, revealing a very wretched look. She had never been treated so disrespectfully before. She immediately said in a cold tone, "Are you courting death?" Qing Yang, who had been silently observing the actions of the two, was stunned. From their expressions, she could tell that the two of them seemed to be conversing with each other through voice transmissions. She never would have thought that the fellow beside her would actually do something like profaning the underworld saintess. She could already see the murderous intent in the underworld saintess' eyes, but the fellow was still smiling shamelessly. "Didn't you want to see my divination skills? It's best to use you to verify it. You should know whether or not your divination is accurate. Otherwise you will say that I am talking nonsense. Why are you looking at me like that? If you don't want it, just say it. However, I will say this in advance. You were the one who went back on your words, not me." Yu Qianqiu spoke righteously, but there was a lewd smile on his face, purposely trying to disgust the other party. He was overjoyed in his heart and sighed inwardly. Dealing with this kind of woman who was used to being high and mighty. If you don't suppress the east wind, her west wind will suppress your east wind. You can't always be nice to her. When it's time to take care of her, you have to take care of her. Don't be fooled by his complacent appearance. In fact, he knew his own capabilities best. If he hadn't gone to the all-heavens boundary and learned some secrets, he wouldn't have dared to bully the underworld saintess like this. Even if he was given 100 times more courage, he wouldn't have dared to do so. However, the underworld saintess thought that Yu Qianqiu was deliberately advancing in order to retreat. If she refused now, the other party would naturally take advantage of her. Even if she took care of him, he would still be in the right. Thus, she resisted the urge to slap Yu Qianqiu to death. She clenched her teeth and transmitted her voice, "Is there anyone who divines like you?" Yu Qianqiu grabbed her hand, which was gradually becoming a little tense, and continued to touch her wrist. As he touched it, he laughed shamelessly and said, "To think that you are proficient in the art of divination. There are tens of thousands of techniques that you need to know, and they all return to the origin. Could it be that you don't know that there is a technique in the art of divination called bone feeling? A person's fate is, in fact, predestined in the unseen world. Then how can it be reflected? It is reflected in a person's bone texture." The saintess was slightly stunned by his words. Although she didn't know how to touch bones, she was, after all, proficient in this field. Not only did Yu Qianqiu's words make sense, but some of them were indeed reasonable in the art of divination. It didn't seem like he was talking nonsense. However, the lewd smile on his face, which was like that of a prostitute, was really unbearable. The most hateful thing was that his so-called bone touching, no matter how she looked at it, seemed like he was molesting a good woman. After touching for so long, what did you find? The saintess's tone was so gloomy that ice water could be wrung out of it. She suddenly withdrew her hand and subconsciously looked at the people standing in front of her, afraid that they would see her. Fortunately, everyone was facing forward to show respect to her, the saintess of the underworld. Only the woman at the side was stunned. Little did she know, if everyone was watching, Yu Qianqiu might not have dared to do this. Of course, this guy couldn't be judged by common sense. Perhaps he would dare to do such a despicable thing in front of everyone. In reality, he was thick-skinned and black-hearted. There was nothing he didn't dare to do. Everything depended on the situation. I only touched for so long and I only touched one palm. What can I find? Yu Qianqiu complained weakly. The saintess suddenly looked over and said with a cold and stern voice, "Then how much longer do you want to touch? Where else do you want to touch? If you can't say anything, believe it or not, I will immediately chop off your hands." What a joke. I will let you see my divine foresight. Yu Qianqiu chuckled in his heart, but his expression turned solemn as he replied, "Since that's the case, then I'll have to embarrass myself. If I've miscalculated in any way, please forgive me." You want me to forgive you if you are wrong? The saintess of the underworld was instantly angry. She gnashed her teeth and emphasized word by word, "If you are wrong, I will chop off your dog hands. I will try my best." Yu Qianqiu pretended to touch his chin and rolled his eyes as he pondered. Then he explained seriously, "From the bone pattern on your palm and your current identity, the Emperor of the Underworld, by Qi, is the Supreme Master of the Underworld, but he regards you as the Saintess of the Underworld and will probably listen to everything you say. Therefore you have a faint air of the Overlord of the Underworld. If I am not wrong, there should be a word, Overlord, in your name. Am I right?" The Saintess of the Underworld trembled all over. She looked at Yu Qianqiu in a daze. After a moment of silence, she didn't say whether Yu Qianqiu was right or not. She just gnashed her teeth and said, "Continue to calculate." Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to force her to give him an answer. Jiang Hu's game was a psychological tactic, so he could take it slowly. He rubbed his chin and began to shake his head and roll his eyes. "From the bone pattern on your palm and my calculation, ordinary experts who are proficient in divination know that the mysteries of heaven can't be revealed. But you are doing the opposite, forcing me to tell you the result of touching the bone. In fact, this already contains a certain principle of fate. You want me to tell you the result of my calculation. What does it mean? It means that you want me to announce it to the public. Then what I am doing to you now can only be summed up in one word, which is announce. It means that I am now revealing the mystery to you. So there must be a word, announce, in your name. Am I right?" Chapter 1109. Was there a need to ask? Even if he didn't touch her hand and didn't deliberately disgust her, he was sure that he was right. However, the underworld saintess didn't think so. Ever since she walked out of the all-heavens boundary, she hadn't told anyone her name. It had been so long that she had almost forgotten what her name was. It was even more impossible for people outside the all-heavens boundary to know her name. If it was a coincidence that Yu Qianqiu got one word right, then why did he get 2 words right in a row? What convinced her most was that Yu Qianqiu's calculation was reasonable and convincing, and it didn't seem like a blind guess at all. Most importantly, Yu Qianqiu's calculations were correct. Her name really did have the characters Tai and Xian in it. This was definitely not something that could be found through simple guesses and guesses. Although she was proficient in the art of divination, she was frankly shocked, very shocked. She never dreamed that Yu Qianqiu would have this skill. Not only did she look at him in a new light, but she also suddenly felt that this Yu Qianqiu was somewhat unfathomable. Thinking that she couldn't see through his fate, it was naturally not surprising that he had some hidden skills. Therefore, she was even more certain that he was the person she was looking for. How could she know that Yu Qianqiu had mingled with people from all walks of life in his previous life? What kind of tricks had he not seen? It was as easy as a knife-cutting tofu to fool a person with little experience like her. Especially with his eloquence, even a veteran of the Jianghu would inevitably fall for it. Seeing that the other party was shocked by his fortune-telling skill and couldn't speak for a long time, looking at him with extremely complicated emotions, Yu Qianqiu immediately squeezed out an unfathomable smile, but his eyes were maliciously glancing from her face to her chest, wondering which place to touch next. What else? The underworld saintess suppressed her emotions and asked. Yu Qianqiu recovered from his imagination and casually said, "Your name is 3 words. Why do you say that?" Her tone was no longer as harsh as before. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to display the divine quintessence of blind fortune-telling that he learned in his previous life, he realized that something was amiss. His eyeballs immediately drooped down and he said helplessly, "Do you think I'm an idiot? Was there even a need to calculate this? You've already said that there's more. Since there's more, it's naturally 3 words. It seems like there are quite a few people with 4-character names, right?" The Netherworld Saintess sneered. Yu Qianqiu realized that he couldn't justify himself. He immediately took out his special skill of fortune-telling for the Saintess of the Underworld and changed the topic. From the bone texture on your palm and my calculation, your name is 3 words. Am I right? The Underworld Saintess was shocked by his words again. She was stunned for a moment and then asked, "Since you said it's 3 words, why don't you calculate the word in the middle?" She was like a dead duck that was asking for trouble. She refused to admit that Yu Qianqiu's calculation was correct. She had no one to blame but herself for being tricked. Earlier, I had only touched it for a short period of time, so I did not manage to get a clear grasp of it. I was only able to calculate out 2 characters. If you let me touch it again, I should be able to calculate it out, Yu Qianqiu said, appearing somewhat troubled. This person. His curiosity mustn't be aroused. Otherwise, if he was seduced halfway, how would he be able to deal with it so easily? The Netherworld Saintess bit her red lips under her veil. She took the initiative to bring the hand that was touched to Yu Qianqiu. The fingers were slender and the skin was snow white. They actually trembled slightly. Embarrassed, Yu Qianqiu grabbed them and touched them repeatedly. The Netherworld Saintess actually took the initiative to let this guy touch her hand? Qingyang, who was silently observing the two's actions, opened her mouth slightly. Her face was filled with disbelief. She now had 10,000 reasons to believe that this man and woman must have been together for a long time. The so-called blind man naturally had his own way of fortune-telling. Otherwise, how could he make a living? Yu Qianqiu touched her hand and his heart bloomed with joy. He couldn't help but think back to the time when he found the same blind man to read his fortune for 3 consecutive days. He remembered that the blind man was really blind. He was so eloquent that he almost fooled a veteran in the pugilistic world. Later on, he kept an eye out and changed his identity to find the blind man to read his fortune for 3 consecutive days. In the end, the blind man told 3 different fortunes in 3 days. Furthermore, each time he felt like he was convinced. He was too good at fooling people. Who would have thought that he wasn't angry? Instead, he was shocked. He directly invited the blind man back with a high salary. He was given good food and drinks and a few beauties served him. In the end, the blind man didn't disappoint him. He was loyal and devoted. At the crucial moment, he would appear and perform miraculous deeds for him. He became his right-hand man. After he died, Yu Qianqiu didn't know how the blind man was doing. He missed him so much. After touching her hand for a while, he thought that with the previous deceit as a foundation, it was time to let the other party know his abilities. He rolled his eyes and said with certainty, "Uncle, there's one more word that is uncle. Your full name is Taishu Xian." His black eyeballs drooped down as he stared at the other party and asked, "Am I right?" Although he asked, his face was filled with great confidence in his bone-touching divination art. Actually, when she had calculated the first 2 words, she was already mentally prepared. When she heard that her full name was really out, the Netherworld Saintess was very calm this time. She slowly pulled her hand back and said coldly, "The bull's head doesn't match the horse's mouth. Not a single word is correct. This is not my name at all. Your so-called mastery of divination is only SOSO. Impossible." Yu Qianqiu denied it on the spot, cursing the dead duck's stubbornness in his heart. Then he used his voice to refute, "My fortune-telling art has never failed before. Forget a name. If it weren't for the fact that you're a woman, I would have even divined the names of 8 generations of your ancestors for you. I would have even divined the fate of your past life." The Netherworld Saintess was stunned. She admitted that she didn't have the ability to calculate the names of other people's 8 generations of ancestors, but she didn't think that Yu Qianqiu was bragging. She just asked with a voice transmission with a puzzled look in her eyes, "What does this have to do with whether I'm a woman or not?" Yu Qianqiu's gaze stopped at her chest. He coldly snorted and said, "If you weren't a woman, I would be able to feel your father's name from your left sternum and your mother's name from your right sternum. If I felt your entire body, you wouldn't be able to hide your fate from me even if you wanted to. You are a woman and I am a man. How can I touch your body so casually?" The expression under the black veil twitched. She clenched her teeth and remained silent for a long time. Then she said the word shameless. She didn't say anything else, which made Yu Qianqiu's evil intentions fail. Yu Qianqiu was a well-educated man, so he wouldn't force himself to touch her. However, there was a puzzled look on his face. He didn't know why this netherworld saintess wanted to sit next to him. Was it just because she recognized him? The fighting noises in the valley gradually disappeared. Then, there was the sound of a large number of people flying away. The surroundings suddenly fell into a dead silence. A few hours later, 2 beams of light flew over the 2 people's heads at an incredible speed. By the time they realized what was going on, the 2 beams of light had returned. Obviously, they had discovered them. Jin Tai and Bai Qi appeared not far from the flying shuttle. Everyone was overjoyed and bowed. "Greetings, immortal emperor, greetings, emperor of the underworld." Qingyang also stood up and bowed. Only the netherworld saintess and Yu Qianqiu remained motionless. Now that the World Commerce Association of Yu Qianqiu had collapsed and his subordinates had left the immortal realm, he didn't have to worry about being restrained. He didn't care if they were the immortal emperor or the emperor of the underworld. Jin Tai and Bai Qi looked at the 2 motionless people and glanced at each other. Then, they landed on the flying shuttle and politely cupped their hands towards the netherworld saintess. Bai Qi bitterly smiled and said, "I heard from Qianjun that the saintess had secretly left the underworld royal palace a few days before the war broke out. It seems that the saintess had already predicted this calamity." Jin Tai indifferently snorted and said, "So what if she predicted it? Didn't your underworld royal palace still perish?" He was clearly unhappy that the netherworld saintess didn't warn him in advance. The might of the heavens is hard to predict. No one can see the trend of the heavenly Tao. Who can go against the trend of the heavens? They can only go with the flow. If it wasn't for this, why would I be trapped in the mortal world for 100,000 years? The netherworld saintess glanced at the 2 and said, "Under the might of the heavens, I am like a small boat in a raging river. I can't stop anything. It is already not bad that I could reach the shore in the midst of the raging waves." Jin Tai coldly snorted, "If the might of the heavens is hard to predict, then why did the saintess avoid the disaster in advance? If I could predict the movement of the might of the heavens, then I would be the heavenly Tao. I just happened to avoid this disaster because I wanted to find someone. This is fate." The netherworld saintess lightly waved her hand and said, "If I didn't deliberately delay here for a while, I'm afraid the 2 of you would have already encountered Wang Qin. There's no point in reasoning with people like you." Jin Tai flew into a rage, but Bai Qi quickly blocked him. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting together with the netherworld saintess, he was slightly surprised. He squinted his eyes and asked, "This friend's face is covered with something. It seems like he doesn't want to show his face. I wonder if he is an old acquaintance of Bai Qi?" Jin Tai immediately looked over and coldly snorted, "Hiding your head and hiding your tail. One look and I can tell that you are hiding something." The others were slightly shocked as they looked at Yu Qianqiu. They didn't have Jin Tai and Bai Qi's microscopic vision that could see through the human skin mask. Qingyang's expression shook. Her eyes flickered as she stared at Yu Qianqiu. She was more and more convinced of her guess. Deming Luan quickly came out and cupped his hands at Jin Tai. "Immortal Emperor, please calm your anger. This person was sent by an old friend of mine to inform this subordinate. It was precisely because of his timely report that this subordinate was saved from danger." Jin Tai glanced at the others. Seeing Ye Shaoqian nod in agreement, he shouted, "Then let him take off his mask." Yu Qianqiu was just about to take Deming Luan and leave when the netherworld saintess quietly said, "He is my subordinate. I don't think he needs to listen to you, right?" Chapter 11:10. The great Ming Luan, who had received Yu Qianqiu's secret message, also felt that it was inappropriate to stay here for Yu Qianqiu's safety. However, when he heard the underworld saintess's words, he felt that there was still a chance, so he asked Yu Qianqiu to wait for an opportunity. Jin Tai raised his sword-like eyebrows and stared at the underworld saintess with a murderous look. "You shameless bitch. Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Bai Qi frowned slightly. He stood in front of Jin Tai and said sternly, "Jin Tai, what do you want to do? Now is not the time to have internal strife." "You want to have internal strife just because I killed her?" Jin Tai stared at Bai Qi coldly and snorted, "Are you going to fall out with me because of her?" Bai Qi. "So what if you have served this bitch for so many years? So what if I have always been respectful to her? Your underworld royal palace and my immortal palace will collapse just like that. What's the use of keeping this bitch?" In one sentence, he revealed the reason why he was respectful to her. "I have never expected you to be respectful to others from the bottom of your heart. I'm not surprised that you have said this. The underworld saintess slowly stood up and turned to look at the distant night sky. She gave people a feeling of emptiness and said lightly, "If I am not wrong, you should want to go to the immortal world to find someone to help you out of your predicament, Jin Tai. If you dare to touch me, I won't say that you can't find the person you are looking for, but at least I will make you die without a burial place." "Just you?" Jin Tai snorted disdainfully, but his eyes slightly glanced at Bai Qi. He saw that Bai Qi was looking at the underworld saintess with a surprised expression. It seemed that he did not secretly reveal to the underworld saintess that he was going to the immortal world's ancient forest. Jin Tai was secretly shocked and dispelled the idea of being too presumptuous. The underworld saintess tilted her head and looked at him and said indifferently, "You can try and touch me. We should be in the same boat at this time. Don't quarrel over such a small matter." It could be said that Bai Qi understood Jin Tai better, so he quickly spoke up to be the peacemaker. Jin Tai just coldly snorted and followed Bai Qi's way down the slope, not mentioning the matter of Yu Qianqiu again. The others remained silent and didn't say anything. Bai Qi glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was still sitting motionlessly. He didn't see any part of him that looked like a subordinate of the underworld saintess. He turned to Nie Shaoqian and said, "You drive the flying shuttle to the ancient forest in the immortal world." "An ancient forest in the immortal world?" Yu Qianqiu, who had been maintaining his vigilance, was startled. He immediately thought of the person that Wei Chuanqiu had mentioned from the underworld saintess words. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, could it be that Bai Qi and Jin Tai are looking for Wei Chuanqiu's grandfather to come out and help? Thinking of this, he immediately had the intention to follow and see what was going on. He was not in a hurry to leave. Nie Shaoqian glanced at Jin Tai. Seeing that her master had no intention of objecting, she immediately said, "Yes." Taking over in Gao's role, the flying shuttle turned into a stream of light and flew away. No one on the flying shuttle spoke. The netherworld saintess tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu, who seemed to be thinking of something, and sat down next to him. It was not convenient for Qingyang to sit down in front of the immortal emperor, so the man and woman sitting at the back were no longer crowded. Bai Qi turned back to look at the two of them, but didn't say anything. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting next to the netherworld saintess, transmitted his voice and asked, "Who are they going to the ancient forest in the immortal world to find?" He wanted to confirm his guess. "I don't know." The netherworld saintess answered very straightforwardly. Yu Qianqiu choked for a while. "Didn't you calculate that they are going to the immortal world to find someone to help them get out of their predicament?" "I only roughly calculated some of their movements. If I can even calculate what they are going to do or who they are looking for, then doesn't that mean I can control everyone's fate?" The netherworld saintess looked at him and asked, "Could it be that your bone-touching fortune-telling technique is so amazing?" Although she refused to openly admit that Yu Qianqiu had the ability to tell fortunes, her words undoubtedly showed that she really believed him. Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment, his gaze landing on her face that was half covered by a black veil. He was very curious about what the face behind the black veil looked like. Blinking his eyes, he shamelessly replied, "Of course. If you let me carefully touch your face, I'll be able to calculate who you're looking for and what you're doing." In his heart, he added, "I've long since calculated that you want to find the devil god for revenge." He was making irresponsible remarks, but the netherworld saintess was frightened by his accurate name. Her eyes flashed as she looked at Bai Qi and Jin Tai, and she changed the topic. "Since you are so clever, why do you still ask me? Why don't you just calculate for them and find out who they are looking for?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said in confusion, "I say Taishu Xian, do you think Jin Tai and Bai Qi will let me touch their faces?" "My name is not Taishu Xian. You are wrong." The netherworld saintess said this and didn't say anything, so Yu Qianqiu's fortune-telling magic was stuck in his mouth and couldn't be used. After crossing the underworld and entering the immortal world, because they had to avoid as many people as possible, and at the same time they had to hide. So even though Nie Shaoqian personally drove the flying shuttle at an extremely fast speed, it still took them half a month to finally enter a vast forest, which was their destination. Finally, they arrived at the ancient forest of the Wood Fairy province. Although they were still at the periphery of the ancient forest, they could see towering trees everywhere. The forest was dark, and the sporadic light from the sunlight dotted the surroundings. The old trees and vines were entangled, and the ground was covered with thick rotten leaves. You could hear the rustling sound when you stepped on it. The 11 people quickly looked around, and they all knew that there were countless plant spirits in this ancient forest. Finally, their eyes all focused on Jin Tai. Except for Yu Qianqiu, who could guess most of it, no one else knew who Jin Tai was looking for. Jin Tai, where is the person you were talking about? Bai Qi asked, floating 1 foot above the ground. His bare feet obviously didn't want to step on the rotten leaves on the ground. He should be in this ancient forest. Jin Tai's eyes flickered as he looked into the depths of the forest. Then he asked Nie Xiaoqian to give him 10 jade talismans. Holding them together in his palm, 10 faint golden light flowed out of his palm and seeped into the 10 jade talismans. He then gently waved his hand and the 10 jade talismans flew in front of the 10 people. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what Jin Tai was doing. One by one they grabbed the jade talismans in front of them. Bai Qi stretched out 2 slender fingers and held the jade talismans in front of him. He repeatedly checked the jade talismans in front of him and frowned. Jin Tai, what do you mean by this? Jin Tai waved his arm and pointed around and said arrogantly, everyone split up and search in the ancient forest. If you see an old guy with a wooden staff, he should be the person we are looking for. Immediately crush the communication talisman in your hand to summon me. Nie Xiaoqian and the other immortal palace remnants paused for a moment, but they still saluted in unison. Yes, immortal emperor. Bai Qi looked at Jin Tai and his expression twitched a little. He said in a deep voice, Jin Tai, are you kidding me? You don't even know where the person is and you brought me here? The entire ancient forest is so big. Trying to find a person here aimlessly is like looking for a needle in a haystack. How do you want us to find him? Jin Tai immediately looked at him and said indifferently, do you have a better way? At least it's better than your stupid way. Bai Qi looked around the depths of the forest coldly and said, there are many plants in this ancient forest. As long as you catch a few and ask them, you will naturally find the person you are looking for. Qin Tai coldly snorted and said, I don't know how many times I've used this clever method of yours, but it's completely useless. Even in the ancient forest, that old fellow's traces are elusive. Even if it's the grass demons that live here all year round, they at most know of the existence of such a person, but no one knows where he is. As soon as these words came out, everyone felt that it was even more difficult to find him. Bai Qi paused and suddenly revealed a ruthless expression. Desperate times call for desperate measures. We can't care so much anymore. Set fire to the forest and we will be able to force him out. If he really can help us like you said, even if we make a big commotion and alarm our opponents, we don't have to be afraid. Set fire to the ancient forest? Jin Tai's slender eyes flashed and he said sarcastically, this is a good idea, but I'm afraid that even if we force him out, not only will he not help us, but he will also take both of our lives. Do you think that our current opponents are not strong enough? Hearing this, Bai Qi remembered that the person they were looking for was probably the wood spirit, one of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Setting fire to the wood spirit's territory might really anger the wood spirit. Seeing that Bai Qi didn't say anything, Jin Tai glanced at the others and said, let's split up and search, we will have a higher chance of finding him. After saying that, he turned into a beam of light and flew into the depths of the forest, seeming to be a bit impatient. The remnants of the immortal palace obeyed and scattered in the dark forest. Before Qin Yang left, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and wanted to say something, but she stopped for a while. She saw that Yu Qianqiu was holding the big bright wheel, and the Emperor of the Underworld and the Saintess of the Underworld were still there. She couldn't say anything, so she turned around and flew into the forest. Who knew that not long after she flew into the forest, her mother, Nie Xiaoqian, flashed to her side. Nie Xiaoqian was obviously worried about her inexperienced daughter risking her life in the ancient forest alone, so the two of them left together. In reality, everyone knew that the wood spirits in the ancient forest weren't just for show. There were many unknown dangers hidden in the depths of the forest. The 4 scattered commanders also coincidentally met up not far away. It wasn't that they didn't want to obey the immortal emperor's decree, it was just a coincidence. Thus, the 4 of them split into 2 groups, and the distance between the 2 groups wasn't too far. Big bright wheel. My cultivation level is low, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of me. Yu Qianqiu grabbed the big bright wheel's sleeve with a smile, and the big bright wheel nodded graciously. Just as the 2 of them were about to leave together, they heard the Saintess of the Underworld suddenly shout, Niu Yud, you are my subordinate, so naturally I will be the one to take care of you. She also flashed over. Bai Qi, who was floating barefoot, looked at the 3 of them and sneered. He indifferently interjected, Jin Tai has already left, do you 3 still want to put on an act in front of me? Yu Qianqiu. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Chapter 11:11. The three of them looked back at the same time. Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled expression, looking at the underworld saintess Taishu Xian, and then at the great bright wheel but not at himself. Of course, it was inconvenient for him to look at himself, as he didn't seem to know who Yu Qianqiu was talking about. Bai Qi stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to be ignorant, and said with a faint smile, "Yu Qianqiu, do you really want me to tear off the mask on your face to see you?" The great bright wheel's expression changed slightly, but the underworld saintess Taishu Xian remained calm. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. With Bai Qi's cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult for him to see that he was wearing a mask, but he didn't believe that Bai Qi could see his face behind the mask. At most, he would be suspicious and maybe he was trying to trick him. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose and asked, "Is the Emperor of the Underworld calling me? My name is Niu Yid. How could the Emperor of the Underworld mistake me for Yu Qianqiu?" He wouldn't give up until he reached the Yellow River. Mistake? Bai Qi snorted, feeling somewhat unhappy, but he still maintained his gentlemanly demeanor, pointing at Yu Qianqiu and saying with a smile, "If you were standing in front of me alone, I probably wouldn't think that you were Yu Qianqiu. The Great Bright Will has a close relationship with the Tuyao cultivators of the World Chamber of Commerce, so he must have a close relationship with you as well. As for the minor immortal cultivator who could be favored by the saintess, I only heard her mention a fellow called Yu Qianqiu, and never heard her mention anyone else. Also, don't forget that we talked face to face in the Endless Cliffs. It's rare to see a minor immortal cultivator who needs my concentration to see their cultivation. It can't be that so many things happen at the same time, right? Yu Qianqiu. You can hide it from Lady Jean, but you can't hide it from me. I treated you with sincerity. Do you think it's necessary to hide it in front of me?" It turned out that there were so many flaws. It seemed like he had no choice but to admit it. Yu Qianqiu let out a bitter smile while rubbing his nose. He bowed to Bai Qi and said, "Emperor of the Underworld, please forgive me. I really had no choice. Yu Qianqiu knows his mistake." "It's good that you know your mistakes." Bai Qi glanced at the underworld saintess and easily forgave her. He smiled faintly and said, "Naturally, you have your reasons for hiding your true appearance. It has nothing to do with me, so I don't need to pursue it. But I think you don't want to see the Heartless Palace dominate the world, so we should try our best to find the person Jintai mentioned." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately dashed into the dense forest. As expected, he did not pursue Yu Qianqiu. It seemed like he was trying to be friendly. The remaining three looked at each other in the forest. Deming Luan was not familiar with the underworld saintess, so he did not know what to say. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a questioning gaze. Cuckoo. A few birds landed on the treetops, breaking the silence between the three. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and looked at the underworld saintess with a toothache. He said helplessly, "Saintess, why are you following us instead of the Emperor of the Underworld? With our cultivation, we won't be able to protect you if we encounter danger." He also wanted to see what kind of person Luer's grandfather was, but he didn't want to bring this saintess along. Although he knew the background of this saintess, he didn't know what kind of person she was. If he got a woman with a venomous heart to stab him in the back, he would simply be finding trouble for himself. The underworld saintess Taishu Xian ignored Yu Qianqiu's words. Instead, she stared at Deming Luan and said, "I have something to say to Yu Qianqiu alone. You should go further away. There doesn't seem to be anything to talk about between us." Yu Qianqiu's words were cut off by Taishu Xian's determined gaze. He scratched his nose and smiled bitterly at Deming Luan. "Wait for me at a place 10 li ahead." Deming Luan nodded, cupped his fists at the underworld saintess and quickly left. After watching Deming Luan leave, Yu Qianqiu looked at the woman in front of him, scratched his head and said, "Speak. What do you want from me?" "My original name is Taishu Xian. You didn't miscalculate." Taishu Xian looked at him and said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment. Looking around, there was no one around him. His eyes quickly turned as a series of thoughts flashed through his mind. Previously he had been so stubborn, but now he was admitting it so easily? Not knowing what this woman wanted, he denied it immediately. "Saintess, you misunderstand. I was just making it up. Don't take it seriously." "You were able to guess my name just by making it up? Then I'll have to ask you to calculate it seriously." Taishu Xian didn't believe it at all. His name was considered rare, so how could it be made up so easily? She raised her hands to the back of her head, and the black sleeves on her arms slid down, revealing a pair of white arms. The black veil that had been covering her face was quietly taken off, revealing an exquisite and peerlessly beautiful face that even an angel would be ashamed of. She had a head full of black hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, and her snow-white skin was as smooth as jade. She was even more beautiful than Ji Wu. Her beauty was so shocking that it could stop the flow of time. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His gaze was deeply immersed in that peerlessly beautiful face, and he couldn't pull himself away. "Didn't you say that as long as I let you carefully feel the bones of my face, you'll be able to calculate who I'm looking for or what I'm doing?" Tai Shu Xian's pair of beautiful eyes stared at him. The meaning behind her words was very clear. She was clearly asking Yu Qianqiu to use his bone-touching fortune-telling technique again. In fact, the reason why she was pestering Yu Qianqiu was very simple. Naturally, it wasn't because she was attracted to Yu Qianqiu's masculinity. She understood that with her cultivation talent, she would never be able to match a terrifying existence like the devil god. However, she couldn't find anyone with that ability even after searching everywhere. On the contrary, when she talked about Yu Qianqiu with Bai Qi, she had a hint of understanding. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu and Bai Changchun, whose fate couldn't be seen clearly, were the people she was looking for? Although she couldn't be sure if it was those two people, she decided to start with Yu Qianqiu. Because Bai Changchun wasn't that easy to control, she decided to pester Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yu Qianqiu's bone-touching fortune-telling technique shocked her. Listening to his words and observing his actions, it seemed that he was much stronger than her innate talent. At first, she was a little resistant and didn't want to let Yu Qianqiu touch the secrets in the depths of her heart. However, after thinking about it, she was extremely happy. Since Yu Qianqiu was so good at fortune-telling, he might be able to calculate who could help her take revenge. Therefore, this scene happened. Looking at the beautiful face in front of him, Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He thought to himself, "Indeed, dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and mice give birth to children that know how to dig holes." No wonder she was the daughter of Ming, who could attract the devil god and the ancestor of all demons at the same time. The genes that she was born with couldn't be erased. From this, it could be seen how beautiful Ming was in the past. The beauty in front of him made Yu Qianqiu's fingers twitch. He rubbed his hands and smiled awkwardly. Since it's the order of the saintess, how can Yu Qianqiu dare to disobey? What he meant was, then I won't be polite. He pretended to be in a difficult position and strode over to her. Seeing him walking over, Tai Shu Xian's heart was also beating wildly. No man had ever touched her face. She bit her lips slightly and slowly closed her eyes. Yu Qianqiu, who was walking over, stretched out a finger to hook the beautiful jade-like jaw. A smile of success appeared on his face. In his mind, he was already thinking whether he should touch the soft and nice parts of the woman's body next. However, unfortunately, when he moved forward, a ray of sunlight shone through the shade of the trees and directly shone on his eyes. Disappointing. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to avoid the dazzling sunlight. When his finger almost touched the other's chin, he looked at the delicate and beautiful face with closed eyes and suddenly paused. In his mind, Grandma Yan's earnest expectation in the boundary formation of heavens appeared. He had promised Tai Shu Xian that he would tell Tai Shu Xian that Grandma Yan missed her very much. Did he really want to take advantage of her for a moment of pleasure? Yu Qianqiu's outstretched hand slowly dropped down, and the snicker on his face gradually disappeared. Regardless of whether he would offend Tai Shu Xian by doing this, at least he could have a good relationship with Grandma Yan in the boundary formation of heavens. Maybe she could help him in the future. How could he lose the big picture because of a small gain? Looking at Tai Shu Xian, who seemed to notice that something was wrong and was about to open her eyes, Yu Qianqiu took a step back and said with a wry smile, "Tai Shu Xian, Grandma Yan misses you very much." Grandma Yan? Tai Shu Xian was very moved. She opened her eyes and said with a pair of beautiful eyes, "This is also calculated by you? Don't count for anything." Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "I was just joking with you. I don't really know how to read fortunes. It's just that you haven't gone back to see Grandma Yan for so many years, so I'm just giving you a slight punishment." He first denied that he had taken advantage of Grandma Yan and said honestly, "I have entered the boundary formation of heavens and met Grandma Yan. I have heard Grandma Yan talk about you." "Impossible. How could you have passed through the boundary formation of heavens?" Tai Shu Xian shook his head repeatedly to express his disbelief. Without a choice, Yu Qianqiu could only roughly explain the matter of him meeting Grandma Yan. However, he excluded the matter of finding Bai Changchun and Xin Yu being able to enter and exit the boundary formation of heavens at will. After all, he didn't know Tai Shu Xian's character very well, so he didn't dare to reveal anything. Looking at Tai Shu Xian's expression, which showed that he had already believed him, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, Tai Shu Xian. It's easier said than done to deal with the demonic god. Currently, the immortal realm and the netherworld are already in chaos. Although your cultivation is higher than mine, I'm afraid it's not enough to guarantee your own safety. You'd better go back. Grandma Yan really misses you. Go back. Tai Shu Xian muttered to himself in a daze. If I don't take revenge for my parents, how can I calm down and stay there? I have already conveyed Grandma Yan's words. It's up to you whether you want to go back or not. I can't force you. If you want to go back, just let me know. I will find a way to send you back. Think about it yourself. Yu Qianqiu looked at her, who was in a daze, and shrugged his shoulders. He left her alone and flashed towards the direction where the great bright wheel had left. In the depths of the dense forest 10 miles away, the great bright wheel was really waiting for him. When the two met, the great bright wheel looked behind him and found that he was alone. It couldn't help but ask, "You got rid of the netherworld saintess?" Chapter 11-12. Ignore her for now. Let's see if we can find the person Jintai mentioned. That person might be an old acquaintance of Wei Chuanqiu's. Yu Qianqiu's gaze searched around, thinking of where to look. Wei Chuanqiu knows him? Deming Luan was a little surprised. He didn't know when Wei Chuanqiu knew such a powerful person. He had never heard of him. He looked around in disbelief. This ancient forest is so vast. Do we really have to search one area at a time? Search one area at a time? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I'm afraid we won't be able to find that person even if we search the entire ancient forest. I heard Wei Chuanqiu say that the person's residence seems to be in another world. Moreover, the entrance is erratic. It's not like the other two worlds that are fixed in one place after the passage opens. It's very mysterious, so we have to rely on luck to find that person. Otherwise, Jintai wouldn't have used such a stupid method to find that person. He suddenly turned his head to look at Deming Luan and smiled. Actually, we're just looking. Do we really have to risk our lives to help Jintai? If we run into him, we'll see. If we don't, then forget it. At least on the surface we can get by with Jintai. Don't you think so? He probably didn't realize that without the World Commerce Association's subordinates in the immortal world as restraints, and after witnessing by Changchun's methods that were not inferior to the other experts at Jintai's wedding, his mentality had gradually changed. Although he didn't mean it, his tone when speaking to Deming Luan was no longer as respectful as when speaking to the commander of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. To be more precise, there was no need to act like a grandson in front of Deming Luan. And the great bright wheel had accompanied him step by step, and he had subconsciously become a little unconcerned. Yu Qianqiu's mysterious means of sending Wei Chuanqiu and a large group of people to the divine ruin realm, as well as his relationship with the underworld emperor and the underworld saintess, had all shocked him. Now he realized that this lad was somewhat unfathomable. Most importantly, Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng had a close relationship with this kid. Adding to the fact that they had risked their lives to save him, Deming Luan's mentality had changed greatly. Once the two of them finished discussing, they headed into the depths of the forest together. Walking from the edge of the ancient forest to the depths of the vast forest, one would find that the distance between the trees was getting thinner and thinner, but the individual trees were getting bigger and bigger. Even a dozen people holding hands would not be able to encircle these trees. Some of these towering trees were even hundreds of feet tall, and some of them had a canopy that could cover a radius of several miles, or even dozens of miles. The trunks of these trees were as sturdy and majestic as a city. It was hard to imagine how many years of snow, rain, wind, and frost they had experienced to grow to such a size. The magnificent trees attracted Yu Qianqiu from time to climb up to the crown of the trees. Standing on the branches, he looked around at the undulating green ocean. He realized that the scenery was even more spectacular and shocking than when he was flying in the sky. A gust of wind blew past, bringing with it a refreshing air. Amidst the rippling blue waves in front of him, there were also many beautiful purples and beautiful reds. There were all kinds of trees with leaves that were not green. A flock of white-feathered birds circled above the sea of trees for a while, then landed on the crown of the trees like blooming magnolia. One could even see light apes with their arms spread out, eagle cries circling in the sky, and tiger roars and ape cries below. It was a natural scene that fascinated people. Deming Luan, who was standing on the crown of the tree, looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He did not know why he looked so infatuated. Deming Luan had not experienced the destruction of nature in the industrial era of Yu Qianzhou's previous life. As an immortal with profound cultivation in this era, he could not understand the worship of nature of the people of that era. In the future, if it is possible, I would like to build a hut in this vast sea of trees and no longer care about the gratitude and grudges of this world. Standing on the crown of the tree, Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and pointed at the green ocean in all directions. Deming Luan did not know why he was sighing. Chu Qingji's eyes slightly muttered to himself, "Where there are people, there are grudges. Once you step in, it is very difficult to leave. You do not want to provoke others, but there will always be people who cannot forget about you. If you want to live in seclusion, you must have enough strength. Otherwise, how can your former enemies let you go?" How could he not know this principle? Yu Qianzhou casually plucked a leaf from the branch beside him and placed it in his mouth. After chewing for a while, the juice of the leaf was stuck in his mouth and a bitter taste spread on his tongue. After forcefully swallowing it, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Just think about that senior Mu that Wei Chuanqiu spoke of. If he did not have profound strength, how could he live in seclusion here for so many years without anyone daring to disturb him? The two of them jumped down from the crown of the tree and continued to search. Along the way, they discovered that on the dark ground covered by the towering trees, this land that never saw the light of day all year round began to reveal a wonder of life that was completely different from the outside world, all kinds of glowing plants. The deeper they went, the more glowing plants there were. Gradually, large groups of glowing plants appeared in their field of vision. Glowing moss, glowing mushrooms, all kinds of ferns and fungus plants displayed a dazzling array of colors. There were also all kinds of vines that were like weeping willows that emitted a natural and gentle glow. Yu Qianzhou marveled at the wonders of nature. He could not help but fall into a group of lavender-like plants that emitted a gentle purple light. This immediately startled the small animals that were lurking in or around it. Butterflies spread their glowing palm-sized wings and fluttered. Beetles with star-like spots of light on their shells hurriedly fluttered their wings and flew away. Just as they landed and climbed onto a tree trunk not far away, they saw a parrot-like bird with blue feathers on its head scuttling out from the branches and leaves of the tree trunk. It quickly hunted the beetles and then chased after the beetles that were flying around. A group of porcupine-like little fellows with a cluster of bluish-white glowing thorns on their backs quickly escaped from under Yu Qianzhou's feet. A fierce female porcupine, in order to protect her cubs, bent the thorns on her back and took the initiative to attack Yu Qianzhou. As a result, she was kicked away by Yu Qianzhou, who did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. She rolled a few times not far away and quickly ran away with the group of cubs while screaming. A few ghost-like black panthers crawled out of the natural cave formed by the roots of the tree. They stared at Yu Qianzhou with their green eyes and let out a low growl. They seemed to be ready to attack. Yu Qianzhou ignored them. Instead, he raised his head and looked up at the tree. He saw a huge python in a colorful camouflage aiming at the black panthers below. It silently slid down the tree trunk and approached them. The black panthers seemed to have noticed something from Yu Qianzhou's actions. A black panther that seemed to be the leader raised its head and looked up at the tree. It immediately let out a frightened roar to warn the others. Several black panthers quickly fled. When the huge python saw that its prey had escaped, it raised its head and hissed angrily at Yu Qianzhou. It suddenly shot over like an arrow leaving the bow. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. The purple flame high-energy saber that was protecting his side immediately shot out a few streaks. In an instant, the huge python was torn into hundreds of pieces in midair. It fell to the ground in a rain of blood. The gorgeous and enchanting colors were immediately mixed with the smell of blood. It immediately caused the air to throb faintly. It seemed to have triggered something. It immediately made the great Ming Luan, who was standing in the sea of flowers and on the tree trunk not far away, become vigilant. Suddenly the ground made two soft sounds. Yu Qianzhou felt his legs tighten. He saw two tree roots that were as thick as an arm bursting out from the ground and wrapping around his legs. The roots quickly extended upwards and pierced towards Yu Qianzhou's chest like a sharp spear. Yu Qianzhou quickly grabbed it with both of his hands. He looked around and said, "What evildoer?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ground made a series of popping sounds. Hundreds of tree roots pierced towards him like spears. Yu Qianzhou shouted sternly, "You're courting death." His whole body exploded with a purple light that was condensed from a high temperature. Wherever the purple light flashed, all the plants turned into ashes. The tree roots that had shot out were instantly destroyed. A muffled groan was heard from the forest. The great Ming Luan, who was standing on the tree trunk, stared at a big tree in front of him like an eagle. He waved his sleeves and a dozen bright moon-like light discs quickly shot out. With a series of so-so sounds, the dozens of light discs instantly destroyed the ancient tree in front of him. Audacious human. The remaining half of the big tree let out a strange cry. With a hong sound it sunk into the ground. The dozens of light discs immediately chased after the deep pit that had appeared on the ground with a so-so sound. With a series of rumbling sounds, the light discs burst out from the ground and burrowed back into the great Mingluan's sleeves. The originally serene atmosphere in the surroundings immediately became treacherous. It's a tree demon. Its ability to burrow underground is not bad. It runs really fast. The great Mingluan snorted and looked around. He then frowned and said, "I'm afraid we've gotten into trouble. It's not good to stay here for long. It's better to leave as soon as possible. It's not that we're afraid of them. It's just that there are many plant demons in this ancient forest. It'll be very troublesome to get entangled with them." Just as Yu Qianshou nodded his head, he heard a rumbling voice coming from all directions. "You want to leave?" Too late. The shadows of the trees in all directions danced in the wind. The surrounding ancient trees suddenly grew and covered the sky. In an instant they sealed off all directions. The great Mingluan flashed to Yu Qianshou's side. Both of them floated in the air. Countless tree roots emerged from the ground. In a short while, all the glowing plants on the ground were annihilated in the churning soil. The tree roots on the ground were entangled tightly. The light in the surroundings immediately disappeared. It was pitch black. The great Mingluan looked around and snorted coldly, "A group of things that don't know the immensity of the heaven and earth. If you don't move, don't blame me for killing you all." Suddenly, 8 balls of green light flashed out from the dense wall of trees. The sealed space was instantly filled with a dazzling green light. 8 green-robed old men walked out from the green light. Each of them had an angry look on their faces. One of the old men, who was wearing a green leaf crown, stared at the great bright wheel and said indifferently, "So it's an early-stage immortal emperor cultivator, no wonder you dare to boast so shamelessly. Outsiders, even immortal emperors from the immortal world wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous here. How are you compared to immortal Emperor Jintai? Our ancient forest and your immortal palace have an agreement not to invade each other. Why are you killing here?" Chapter 11:13. From the looks of it, this person seemed to be the leader of these people. Mingluan took a closer look and was slightly shocked. He realized that he could not see through the person's cultivation. He looked at the others and found that their cultivation was similar to his. It seemed that this was going to be troublesome. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Yu Qianshou about the situation and discussed whether they should fight or run away. Yu Qianshou was also stunned. He did not expect that he would attract so many experts just by making a move. It seemed that this ancient forest was located within the 3 realms but was independent of the 3 realms. There must be something extraordinary about it. It was obvious that there were more experts in the ancient forest. It would not be good for him to make a big deal out of this. Thinking of this, Yu Qianshou smiled faintly and said, "You are exaggerating. A giant python ambushed me and I killed it. Then a tree demon attacked me first. I did not kill it because this is the ancient forest. If I really wanted to start a massacre, do you think it would have a chance to run?" As he spoke, there was a buzzing sound. His entire body was instantly enveloped by purple flames like firewood that had been ignited. An intense heat surged out. The green light that was flickering on the bodies of the 8 people instantly retracted and formed a protective aura on the surface of their bodies, resisting the frightening heat that made their hearts palpitate. All of them looked at Yu Qianshou in shock and bewilderment. All of them felt a terrifying power that naturally countered each other, causing their hearts to tremble. The pupils of the old man wearing the green leaf crown suddenly shrank and he suddenly cried out, "This is purple fire, purple fire, purple fire of the true Samadhi fire." The other 7 people also cried out, "Purple fire?" Mingluan felt the terrifying temperature around his body. He also looked at Yu Qianshou in bewilderment. He didn't know how many more secrets this fellow had. The tangled roots on the ground and the surrounding tree walls were visibly shrinking with a squeaking sound. It seemed that they were in great pain. Yu Qianshou only wanted to show off. He did not want to become enemies with them. He quickly retracted the terrifying heat and the purple fire into his body. He looked at them with a smile, indicating that he really did not have any evil intentions. Once the purple fire disappeared, the 8 of them finally stabilized their trembling souls. At this moment, they realized that they could not see through Yu Qianshou's cultivation. The 8 of them looked at each other, and the green light on the surface of their bodies retracted back into their bodies. The entangled tree roots on the ground quickly separated and retracted back into the soil. The surrounding tree walls also quickly retracted, and the ancient trees returned to their original positions. The hazy light began to shine down from the sky again. However, the various kinds of light plants that were buried in the soil could not be restored. The scattered light of the plants could be seen in the soil after the tumble. Of the light of the ground of the earth was much darker than before. I admit that your purple fire can restrain us. However, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. The old man wearing the green leaf crown stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "Since nothing serious happened, we do not want to make things difficult for you. We hope that you will abide by the agreement between us and the Immortal Palace. Please leave quickly." Deming Luan immediately snorted. Previously they were not so easy to talk to. It was obvious that they were here to punish us. Now that they realized that something was wrong, they immediately became easy to talk to. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He knew what that humph meant. However, although the purple fire was powerful, if he used it with his own cultivation he would not be able to gain the upper hand if he really fought with these experts. The main reason was that the difference between their cultivation was too big. Moreover, he did not want to become enemies with the people in the ancient forest. "Leave quickly?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He shook his head and said with a smile, "I am afraid that I will have to disappoint you. This time I was invited to the Wood Killer Sea as a guest. I have not met Senior Mu yet. How can I leave so easily?" Wood Killer Sea. A few people frowned and muttered. It seemed that it was the first time they had heard of this. As for Senior Mu, there were simply too many people in the ancient forest who could be called Senior Mu. The 8 of them were no exception. It was also the first time that Deming Luan had heard of this place. However, he believed that Yu Qianqiu did not say it casually. There must be a reason for him to say it at this time. As he pondered, he felt that this Yu Qianqiu was a bit mysterious. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know about the Wood Killer Sea. He had only heard Wei Chuanqiu mention it once, so he casually used it. In any case, he never had any psychological burden when he spoke carelessly. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across the 8 people. From the eyes of the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown, he caught a trace of surprise and uncertainty. He immediately smiled at him and said, "Presumably you should know about the Wood Killer Sea." The other 7 people's gazes immediately focused on him. They all revealed a questioning look. One of them even asked, "You really know?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown hesitated for a while. He muttered, "In the past, when I traveled the entire ancient forest, I vaguely heard people mention that the Wood Killer Sea seemed to be the name of the ancient forest's holy land. The person who said this also heard it but did not dare to confirm it. I did not expect to hear this place mentioned again today. I almost forgot about this name. Damn, Jintai was right. Even the old man who lived here for a long time did not know about it." Yu Qianqiu was a little disappointed. However, he heard the 7 people say in unison, "Holy Land." It seemed like they had never heard of the Wood Killer Sea before. Holy Land. Yu Qianqiu's spirit was lifted. He looked left and right and said with a mouth full of nonsense, "Yes, that's right. The Wood Killer Sea is the holy land of the ancient forest. Do you know where it is?" Everyone's gazes immediately focused on him. Although the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown was somewhat mentally prepared, he still could not help but say in surprise, "The Senior Mu you are talking about is the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu was immediately filled with joy. Finally he had a chance to find the place where the wood spirit lived. Although he could not devour it now, he could first find the place and mark it. Who knows, it might be useful in the future. He immediately nodded and said, Yes, it is the Senior Mu from your Holy Land." Although he was not sure, he was most likely right. "You were invited by the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown asked in disbelief. Yes, I was invited by him." Yu Qianqiu nodded sincerely. Deming Luan looked at him suspiciously. The old man was not an idiot. After the initial shock he realized that something was wrong. He also asked suspiciously, "Since Senior Mu invited you to the Holy Land as a guest, how could you not find the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu spread his hands without hesitation and said with a bitter smile, "Senior Mu's cultivation is profound and I view him as a god. He said he would let me visit the ancient forest's holy land, the Wood Killer Sea, as a guest. I naturally agreed on the spot and I was a man of my word. But I did not know that the Holy Land, the Wood Killer Sea, was so hard to find. After searching for a few days, I did not even see Senior Mu's shadow. If you guys know where the Holy Land is, why don't you bring me there? I will reward you handsomely. He said it as if it was the truth. Was he for real? Deming Luan suppressed the suspicion in his eyes. He was afraid that others would misunderstand. You have seen Senior Mu from the Holy Land? An old man said enviously. The others were also envious. It was as if meeting Senior Mu was such a lucky thing. The old man wearing a wooden crown was envious, but he shook his head regretfully. Senior Mu is mysterious. There are only legends about him in the ancient forest. The number of people who have seen him can be counted on one's fingers. Even if they have seen him, it is a taboo. Very few people would talk about Senior Mu, so I do not know who has seen him. The gate to the Holy Land is even more elusive. Without a certain amount of luck, it is impossible to enter. Legend has it that if we wood cultivators are lucky enough to enter the Holy Land, we will receive guidance from Senior Mu. It is very beneficial to our cultivation. Unfortunately, we do not have the fortune to go to the Holy Land. The others heard this and had a look of yearning. Only Yu Qianqiu observed their expressions and said with disappointment, "So, you guys do not know where the Holy Land is?" "Indeed we do not know." The old man wearing a wooden crown shook his head. He suddenly paused and said, "But since you were invited by Senior Mu, perhaps you can try your luck at the ancient language tree. Maybe you will encounter the gate to the Holy Land." Ancient language tree? Where is it? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. The old man waved his hand and pointed to the east. In the center of the ancient forest there is a cliff. Beside the waterfall, there is a towering tree called the ancient language tree. Its leaves are yellow and withered. It is said that it has died for countless years. But it has not died for countless years. It has experienced countless snow, rain, wind, and frost, but its withered leaves have not fallen. It is very magical. The most amazing thing is that whenever the wind blows, you can hear a strange murmur under the tree. It is as if someone is talking. This is also the origin of the name, Ancient Language Tree. Unfortunately, very few people can understand what it is saying. It is said that those who can understand it can find the gate to the Holy Land. You guys should go and try. Are there many people in the ancient forest? It must be a gathering of experts. Will it be inconvenient for people from the outside world to go there? Yu Qianqiu asked in detail. He was worried that trespassing into the forbidden area would cause the experts in the ancient forest to gang up on him. The old man paused and immediately understood his concern. He sighed and said, "I heard that it used to be lively there. But too many people wasted their time under the ancient language tree, but they could not understand what it said. Almost all of them returned in disappointment. Plus, it is inconvenient for us wood elementalists to leave our bodies for too long. As time goes by, except for some newcomers, no one else will go there." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and he cursed in his heart. He felt that the old man's guidance was too unreliable. He didn't even need to guess to know that it was only a legend. If it was useful, then the Wood Demon Sea, which regarded it as a holy land, would probably swarm there every day. Chapter 11:14. The old man seemed to know that this matter was not very reliable and was afraid of making the other party unhappy. He smiled awkwardly and said, "I was just saying. Sire, please do as you wish. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave. Take care." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to stop. He stared at the old man and slowly asked, "The ancient forest is so big. How am I going to find the center?" Deming Luan looked at him speechlessly. It seemed like this guy really wanted to do something useless. The old man was very honest. He waved his hand again and pointed to the east. He said with a serious expression, "Go straight to the east. When you see a cliff with a waterfall and a lonely ancient tree, you will reach the center of the ancient forest. The environment there is very obvious and easy to find. You will see it when you get there." Then he kindly warned, "If Sire really wants to go there, I suggest you go straight to the sky. You can more or less avoid some unnecessary trouble. You must know that not everyone in this ancient forest is kind. That is all I have to say. I will take my leave." The other 7 people also followed him and cupped their hands. The soil on the ground surged like a fountain and swallowed the 8 of them. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. "Did you really receive an invitation to the wood-killing sea?" Deming Luan suddenly turned around and asked. Yu Qianqiu looked around and laughed. He did not answer the question. "Since it is like this, I will just treat it as an eye-opener. Let's go." A figure rushed into the sky and broke through the shade. Deming Luan shook his head and followed closely behind. Looking down from the sky, the ancient forest was still endless. The mountains were undulating and the waves were like the sea. It looked spectacular, but it was unknown how many dangers were hidden within. After flying at high speed for 3 days, the two of them who were constantly looking around suddenly slowed down and slowly stopped in the air. In front of the two of them was a red cliff. The cliff was exposed and the rocks were red. It was almost barren. It was very conspicuous in this vast ancient forest. A river meandered out of the forest and crossed the cliff. When it reached the end of the cliff, it was covered by the canopy of a towering golden tree. It was as if all the river water had gathered under the tree. The sound of water splashing could be heard faintly. It should be here. Deming Luan pointed below and said, "Yes, that ancient tree should be the ancient language tree. Let's go. Let's go down and take a look." Yu Qianqiu was the first to go down. He was stunned when he landed under the tree. The Deming Luan who followed was also stunned. There were 2 people who had arrived before them. One was wearing a golden robe while the other was wearing a white robe and was barefoot. The 2 were looking back. These 2 people were none other than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was unknown when they had met here, but since Yu Qianqiu and the Great Bright Wheel could find this place, it was naturally not strange for them to find this place as well. Yu Qianqiu didn't move from his spot, but the Great Bright Wheel flashed over and greeted the 2. "Greetings, Immortal Emperor, greetings, Underworld King." Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the Deming Luan. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place." He turned to Jin Tai and said, "Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance?" Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the Deming Luan. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place." He turned to Jin Tai and said, "Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance?" Jin Tai turned around and looked at the vast green sea at the foot of the mountain. He pointed to both sides of the cliff and said, "You search from this side, I'll search from that side. We'll flank both sides." He then pointed to the front and signaled to Deming Luan, "All of you search from the middle." This all of you obviously included Yu Qianqiu. Bai Qi looked ahead and was silent for a while. He said slowly, "What if we can't find it?" Jin Tai said resolutely, "Then we will lure Wang Qing and the rest here and then set a few big fires to burn the ancient forest. I want to see how long old man Mu can hide." Bai Qi raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked at him and said, "You mean, to kill with a borrowed knife? Lure Wang Qing and the rest here and then set fire to the ancient forest. Then push the blame to Wang Qing and the rest and let that old man Mu settle the score with them?" "That's what you said, I didn't say that." Jin Tai snorted coldly and turned into a stream of light and shot to the left. Bai Qi sneered and turned to smile at Yu Qianqiu. Then he also turned into a stream of light and shot to the right. 2 rays of light, one gold and one white, flew along the cliff and disappeared into the dense forest in the distance in the blink of an eye. This red bare cliff was like a plain. No one knew how the river that was tens of meters wide was formed. Yu Qianqiu walked along the shore towards the great Ming wheel under the ancient tree. From time to time, fat fish jumped out of the water and fell back into the water. When he reached the edge of the steep cliff, he saw that the river suddenly turned into a crystal waterfall, and the sound of water flowing could be heard. Incomparably thick tree roots climbed up the cliff like countless pythons, and even stubbornly rooted into the red rocks. More than a dozen tree roots drilled out from the mountain wall in the waterfall, extending down the mountain wall along the waterfall. Strong and powerful tree roots could also be seen in the river on the cliff. "It would be strange if I could hear anything." Deming Luan coldly snorted, "It's really just a rumor. Do you really want to continue waiting? Don't jump to conclusions so easily. Why don't we wait for a day and see? If there are no abnormal changes tomorrow, it won't be too late to leave." Just as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, another gust of wind blew, and the ancient tree started to murmur again. The 2 people's ears perked up again. There were so many winds in the mountain. Every once in a while they would hear the ancient tree humming a lullaby. This made Yu Qianqiu feel a little drowsy. Suddenly there was a pa-pa sound in the river. A fish jumped out of the water and fell back. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sat up and wiped his face with both hands. He felt that it was too dangerous to fall asleep in a place like this. When he turned around, Deming Luan had already sat up and was looking at him with a cold smile. It seemed to be saying, "You can even fall asleep here, I really have to give it to you." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, "I'll go get something to relieve my fatigue." Then he dashed towards the bottom of the cliff far away. Deming Luan was curious about what this fellow was going to do. After a while, he saw him scurrying back from the bottom of the cliff with a big pile of firewood in his hands. He threw it on the ground and then took out 2 swords and ran to the river bank to look around. Suddenly 2 water pillars shot out from the water and wrapped around 2 fat carps. They dashed towards the swords in Yu Qianqiu's hands and opened their mouths to swallow the swords in their hands. Yu Qianqiu carried the 2 big carps and ran back to the pile of firewood. He took out a set of barbecue utensils. The firewood on the ground was quickly chopped into pieces and stuffed into the barbecue utensils. With a wave of his hand, a ball of red flame was spat out and the firewood in the barbecue utensils turned into bright red charcoal. The 2 fat carps were still twisting their bodies even though they were dead. They were then grilled over the charcoal. After doing all these, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands excitedly and took out 2 jars of wine. He threw one of them to Deming Luan, who was stunned. He then opened the seal and gulped down a few mouthfuls before putting it aside. He took out some seasoning and brushed it on the dead carps. He was beautiful, but when combined with the environment at this moment and place, he really ruined the scenery. Deming Luan was really speechless. He could only sigh as he leaned against the tree and drank by himself. When the aroma of the barbecue was wafting in the air, he suddenly heard Yu Qianqiu's, "Eh?" Deming Luan turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu standing there curiously and said, "This aroma? Don't tell me the barbecue in the ancient forest also has this aroma?" He held his sword with both hands and raised it in front of his face. He fanned his nostrils and sniffed the barbecue in his hand. Chapter 11:15. What's wrong? Great Bright Will asked indifferently. He suddenly realized that this fellow's words and actions seemed to be incompatible with this world. Why would the roasted fish have the fragrance from Luer's body? It doesn't seem to be from the roasted fish. Yu Qianqiu muttered. His face popped out from behind the 2 big roasted fish and said, "Do you smell something?" "Nonsense. Of course it's the smell of the roasted fish." Great Bright Will said in a bad mood. "That's not right. Could it be?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he immediately looked around. Deming Luan's pupils that were looking at him suddenly shrank. He saw that the place where Yu Qianqiu was standing suddenly had a layer of transparent black ripple light wall. If it wasn't for the clear and crystalline light, it would be almost impossible to notice. And Yu Qianqiu, who was inside it, was looking around like a thief, as if he had stolen 2 grilled fish from someone. "Be careful behind you." Great Bright Will cried out in alarm. Yu Qianqiu was shocked when he heard this. He suddenly turned around and his entire body suddenly disappeared. Great Bright Will shot out rapidly and a series of light wheels shot out from his sleeves, shooting towards the wall of light with the force of lightning. However, the exploding light wheels missed. That wall of light seemed to have disappeared at the same time as Yu Qianqiu. The great bright wheel that flashed away searched around the roasted fish. The 10 light wheels that were retracted circled around his body to protect him as if he was facing a great enemy. After that, Great Bright Will flew into the sky and quickly patrolled the surroundings. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a trace of Yu Qianqiu in all directions. When he returned to the side of the barbecue set, the Great Bright Will kicked the barbecue set into the river dozens of meters away with a clang sound. He looked around his surroundings silently, thinking about what had happened just now. Normally, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to leave without saying a word. Furthermore, the situation just now. The great bright wheel was suddenly slightly stunned. Could it be that the mysterious rippling light wall just now was the so-called gate of the sacred land? The more he pondered, the more he felt that it was the case. A gust of wind blew by, and the ancient whisperer tree repeated the same ancient voice that it had been murmuring for countless years. Deming Luan looked at the ancient whisperer tree, and after a moment of absent-mindedness, he shook his head and said to himself with a bitter smile, "Is this kid really that lucky? People couldn't find the door to the Holy Land, but he was roasting fish here and he accidentally entered it? Grilled fish? Otherwise how could there be such a coincidence?" The great bright will seem to have thought of something, and hurriedly flashed to the riverside. He picked up the severely deformed barbecue set from the kick, and used his great cultivation to roughly repair it with a ka-ka sound. Carrying the barbecue set, he carefully examined the position that Yu Qianqiu had placed it earlier, and restored it to its original position. Then he tossed the remaining dry firewood on the ground into the barbecue set, and quickly started a fire. This wasn't the end. He also took out 2 flying swords and with a shwa-shwa sound he stabbed 2 fat carps into the riverside. After everything was ready, he imitated Yu Qianqiu's previous actions, and also pretended to roast the fish. However, he seemed to be a little absent-minded, and would occasionally look behind him. Speaking of which, when Yu Qianqiu heard the great bright wheel's warning, he abruptly turned around to be on guard. Before he could figure out what was going on, he felt as if he had collided with someone. His head also made a dong sound as if he had been hit by something with a stick. In the end, before he could even cry out in pain, a soft and pleasant ouch came from the other side. Yu Qianqiu was instantly enraged. He hit someone and still cried out in pain. This was too much of a bully. Yu Qianqiu focused his eyes and saw a green-clothed little girl staggering back from the collision. When he saw who it was, he couldn't help but be stunned. The green-clothed little girl rubbing her nose also froze when she saw who it was. Lu Er. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. If the little girl in front of him wasn't Lu Er, who he had saved and brought back to the World Merchant Association, then who else could it be? He saw Lu Er carrying a large brown wooden staff. The staff seemed to be made from two intertwined tree roots, and the head of the staff was like a large lingji mushroom. It seemed to be very out of place in Lu Er's hands. Yu Qianqiu? Lu Er was also stunned. If the person in front of her wasn't Yu Qianqiu, then who else could it be? It was just that his expression was somewhat fierce, and he was carrying two swords in his hands, as if he wanted to eat someone who had offended him. But the strange thing was that there were two fragrant dead and deformed fish stuck in the two swords. He didn't know what he was doing. Yu Qianqiu's dull gaze suddenly moved left and right, attracted by the surrounding greenery. In the distance there was a thin mist and the forest was like splashed ink. The mountains were secluded, and the refreshing air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and plants. It was as quiet as a painting, as if he had fallen into a dream. The little girl carrying an uncoordinated staff in front of him was a bit of a wet blanket. Where is this place? Yu Qianqiu had two grilled fish stuck in his hands, and he quickly turned around to look at his surroundings. He realized that in the moment he turned around, the scenery had suddenly changed. Right now he was standing on a hillside that wasn't considered high. His gaze fell upon an ancient tree behind him, and he was once again dumbfounded. The golden leaves and the bronze trunk were exactly the same as the ancient tree he had seen on the cliff earlier. The only difference was that the ancient language tree from before was entrenched on a red stone cliff, while this one was entrenched on a mountain peak. Looking into the distance, it wasn't quite possible to say that it was the same tree, but it was too similar to say that it wasn't the same tree. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew and the golden leaves rustled. The familiar murmuring was like a lullaby, reverberating in his ears again. However, the surrounding scenery had completely changed, and there wasn't the slightest similarity. Yu Qianqiu looked at the ancient tree in a daze. Ancient language tree. Yu Qianqiu, how did you come in? Lu Er, who was carrying a large staff, also asked in a daze. Lu Er, what is this place? Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and asked. Lu Er, who was carrying a large staff, was stunned and said, This is Would Killer See. Would Killer See? Yu Qianqiu's head quickly swayed left and right and looked around again. He said in disbelief, This is Would Killer See? How is this possible? I was grilling fish just fine, why did I suddenly come to Would Killer See? *CK. This is too illogical. Could it be this? His gaze stared at the ancient language tree with golden leaves. What is this? Lu Er, who was already confused, was even more confused. Suddenly she cried out in shock, Not good. Not good. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave. What's wrong? Hearing her say it so seriously, even Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Lu Er carried the brown wooden staff with both hands and activated it with a secret technique. The large staff head immediately brewed a ball of green light. As Lu Er waved the staff, a beam of green light shot towards the ancient language tree like a laser. The trunk of the ancient language tree immediately rippled with green light, and gradually emitted a black splendor. A sullen cold snort sounded, and a green-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion suddenly appeared. With a wave of his hand, he cut off the green light that shot out from the head of the huge staff. His palm made a grabbing motion, and the big-headed staff in Lu Er's hand was immediately sucked over and caught in his hand. Lu Er cried out in shock and quickly flashed behind Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately protected her and angrily shouted as if he was facing a great enemy, Who is it? You're already so old, yet you still want to snatch a little girl's things. Don't you have any shame? The roasted fish on the two swords in his hands still had a lingering fragrance. The green-robed old man looked at him calmly, and the wooden staff in his hand stood upright on the ground. He said indifferently, "So it's you? Luer, come out. He was brought in by you?" Yuchencho was slightly stunned. Hearing the meaning behind these words, the other party seemed to know him, but he didn't seem to have any impression of him. Luer, who was behind him, moved half her body out submissively, and one hand grabbed onto the clothes on the back of Yuchencho. She looked at the old man and weakly called out, "Grandpa!" Yuchencho suddenly turned around and struggled free from the small hand that was grabbing onto his clothes. He looked at Luer and said, "He's your grandpa? Isn't the old man selling snacks in hallucinatory Immortal City your grandpa? How many grandpas do you have?" Luer secretly glanced at the old man and said in a low voice, "Of course there's only one grandpa. The one you saw last time was grandpa's transformation." Upon hearing this, Yuchencho was shocked and sized up the old man again. He thought to himself, no wonder even Jin Tai wanted to find him for help. As expected, he was a very capable person. Whether it was tall or short, fat or thin, his spirit was completely different from that old man last time. This wasn't as simple as a disguise, but a transformation. Supernatural power. "So you're Senior Mu?" Yuchencho hurriedly bowed and said, "Yuchencho was impolite just now. I didn't know that you were senior, please forgive me." Old man Mu didn't care about him at all. He stared at Luer and shouted again, "He was brought in by you?" Luer pouted aggrievedly and said, "No. I also don't know how he came in, he suddenly appeared." With his understanding of the little girl, old man Mu could tell that she wasn't lying. He then stared at Yuchencho and said in a deep voice, "Speak. How on earth did you come in? If there's a single lie, I'll beat you to death immediately." Yuchencho flashed the grilled fish on the two swords and said with a wry smile, "Whether Senior believes it or not, I don't know how I came in either. I was clearly grilling fish under the ancient language tree in the ancient forest. Who knew that I would turn around and inexplicably appear here? Even if you ask me to explain, I can't explain what's going on either." Grilling fish under the ancient language tree? Old man Mu's tone was filled with disbelief. He turned around and pointed his cane at the ancient language tree. Immediately, a green window appeared on the ancient language tree. Like a TV screen, the scene that Yuchencho had seen on the cliff in the ancient forest appeared. Old man Mu waved his cane and the scene slowly rotated. In the end, it was fixed at an angle. The green window showed the scene of the great bright wheel grilling fish with two swords. That guy didn't mind grilling fish, but he kept looking around vigilantly from time to time. His eyes clearly met with the three people here, but he continued to look around vigilantly as if he hadn't seen anything. Judging from the angle from which the window was looking at the great bright wheel, Yuchencho estimated that the place where the great bright wheel was observing the ancient language tree on the cliff. He didn't expect that the ancient language tree could also monitor the outside world. It was really amazing. Chapter 11:16. Before he could think further, old man Mu waved his cane and the green window disappeared. He reluctantly believed that Yuchencho had been roasting fish outside, but this did not mean that he believed everything. He turned around and stared at Yuchencho with his deep eyes. "You went to the ancient language tree in the ancient forest to roast fish? If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, although I am not a bloodthirsty person, I will not be lenient to those with ulterior motives." Yuchencho secretly communicated with Utopia, and when he noticed that it was unobstructed, he immediately had the confidence to protect himself. He immediately said bluntly, "To tell you the truth, I came to look for you." "Look for me?" Old man Mu was slightly stunned and then snorted. "Did that little bat ask you to come?" "Little bat?" Yuchencho was stunned and then realized that he was talking about Wei Chuanqiu. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Senior, you misunderstood me. I didn't want to take the risk here, but I couldn't disobey Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's orders, so I had to bite the bullet and come here. I never thought that I would really meet you, but who knew that I would run into you? Jin Tai asked you to look for me?" Old man Mu also showed a hint of confusion on his face. "He didn't ask me to come alone. The person who was roasting fish outside just now also asked me to come. There are a total of 11 people, including Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi. Everyone is scattered throughout the entire ancient forest to look for you, Senior," Yuchencho said respectfully. "Jin Tai and Bai Qi are here too?" Old man Mu's eyes turned and he asked with some emotion, "Did something happen outside?" "Something big has happened." Yuchencho sighed. From Jin Tai's wedding to Bai Changchun's appearance, to the sudden appearance of Wang Qing, the head of the Heartless Palace, to the sudden appearance of a new force and the defeat of the Immortal Palace, to the King of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng's attack on the Dark Imperial Palace, and finally Jin Tai's decision to ask Old Man Mu for help. So they fled here to find Old Man Mu. During this period, he and the Daming Wheel encountered that group of wood demons and learned about the legend of the ancient language tree. Then he told Yu Qianqiu roughly what had happened. This narration went on for more than an hour. Such a series of ups and downs made the inexperienced Lure's eyes light up. Her face was filled with hope, as if she wished she could be there to experience it. Although the outside world was dangerous, it had a fatal attraction to her. Although Old Man Mu had been suppressing her and wanted her to live an ordinary life, for a person like her who had never experienced the joys and sorrows of the world, how could she settle down if she could not calm down? How could she appreciate the value of ordinary life? Perhaps after she experienced the endless vicissitudes of life and understood that the past was unbearable, she would be willing to live an ordinary life like her grandfather. After a moment of silence, Old Man Mu sighed slightly and said, "It seems that it is time for the immortal realm and the netherworld to change dynasties again." Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Listening to these words, it seemed that the other party would not help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf. In fact, he also wanted this old guy to come out and help Jin Tai. After all, Jin Tai was in power and he still had room to develop slowly, but the Heartless Palace wanted to kill him. Now it seemed that the relationship between Jin Tai and this old guy was not solid. Jin Tai wanted to ask for Senior's help. "Are you going to leave him in the lurch?" Yu Qianqiu asked tentatively. "What do you mean by leave him in the lurch?" Old Man Mu slightly closed his eyes and shook his head, saying, "People don't distinguish between right and wrong. They fight for honor and disgrace. The honored will live in peace and the disgraced will be mediocre. He asked for everything. I have seen a lot of changes of dynasties. It is because I don't want to get involved that I live in seclusion here. What does Jin Tai's life and death have to do with me? How can I leave him in the lurch?" As he said this, he opened his eyes and said, "Do you really want to be a lobbyist for Jin Tai? As far as I know, all the sects in the Immortal Realm have a grudge against the Immortal Palace. As the sect leader of the World Chamber of Commerce, don't tell me that you are willing to submit to Jin Tai." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. The other party had already said this much. He knew that it was useless to say anything else. But then again he was just trying. If he could help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf, it would be a little good. If Jin Tai couldn't turn over a new leaf, it would be good too. That guy's character was really not flattering. The battle at the Immortal Palace had shown that even the lives of his trusted subordinates were worthless in his eyes. It made people feel too insecure. As the saying goes, when a wall is down, people push it. Yu Qianqiu was also not a good guy. After confirming that Old Man Mu would not help Jin Tai, in order to please Old Man Mu, he made up his mind to simply kill that inhumane pervert Jin Tai. After a moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "Senior, after you took Lure from the World Chamber of Commerce last time, Wei Chuanqiu reprimanded me and warned me that I must be respectful when I see you again. So there are some things that I dare not hide from you." Old Man Mu only had a high cultivation and extensive knowledge, but he was not omniscient. When he heard this irrelevant and groundless interjection, he could not help but be startled and said, "What do you want to say?" "It's like this, I inadvertently learned of a conspiracy of Jin Tai. If I can't find Senior for help or Senior is unwilling to help, Jin Tai is going to lure Wang Qing and the others from the Heartless Palace to the ancient forest, and then set the ancient forest on fire to push the blame to Wang Qing and the others. Jin Tai said that if he does this, Senior will definitely not let Wang Qing and the others go." Yu Qianqiu said with a respectful face, looking like he was snitching. "How dare he?" Old Man Mu's long beard and green robe instantly fluttered even though there was no wind. He snorted and said, "Even if you give him 10 guts, he still won't dare." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He could see that this old man thought himself to be an expert and had probably never taken Jin Tai seriously. He did not know Jin Tai's character very well, so water had entered his brain. With Jin Tai's character, he would marry his wife with great fanfare when he was in power, but once he lost power, he would abandon his wife and subordinates and run for his life. Now that he had lost his wife, he did not even mention it. Just imagine if he was forced into a corner, what else would he not do? However, based on the understanding between the two parties, it was not appropriate for Yu Qianqiu to argue with him. He could only take it one step at a time and nodded repeatedly to flatter him. "That's true. Unless Jin Tai is courting death, he would not dare to act recklessly." Old Man Mu indeed did not take Jin Tai seriously and quickly put aside the matter of Jin Tai. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Didn't little bat tell you not to see Lu again? Damn it. I have told you so many things, are you going to fall out with me so quickly?" Yu Qianqiu quickly contacted Utopia and made preparations to escape. Then he cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. "Of course Wei Chuanqiu said that, but I really barged in carelessly. Please forgive me, Senior." Lu was holding his two swords that had pierced through the grilled fish and looked at them carefully. Upon hearing this, she quickly nodded at Old Man Mu and said, "Grandpa, he really didn't do it on purpose, just let him go this time." What? Before she could finish speaking, Old Man Mu had already knocked her on the head with his crutch and said angrily, "If you hadn't stolen my crutch to open the gate, how could he have barged in by chance? You are addicted to sneaking away now." It turned out that ever since Lu went out to see the prosperous world outside, her heart had become wild. The days in the wood-killing sea were too boring and not as fun as the colorful world outside. The last time she sneaked out, she was caught by Old Man Mu and locked up for a short while. She couldn't hold it in anymore, so she stole her grandfather's cane to open the Xianmen Gate. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would turn around and knock her back when the Xianmen Gate was opened? As a result, the Xianmen Gate lost the support of Dharma power and closed on the spot, dragging Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the Xianmen Gate, in. This matter could be said to be coincidental, but it could also be said to be uncoincidental. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, even Lu did not know the inside story. Only Old Man Du Mu himself knew. The ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea and the ancient language tree in the ancient forest were actually the same tree. It was like something in a mirror that was reflected in the two planes. However, it was different from the reflection in the mirror. It was not an illusion but a real object. Whether it was the ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea or the ancient language tree in the ancient forest, the ancient language trees on both sides would disappear at the same time. The ancient language tree was actually the hub that connected the two worlds. The ancient language tree was really ancient. It was the first tree that grew after the celestial realm was established. It could be said to be the ancestor of all trees in the celestial realm. Although it was blessed by nature and lived for a long time, it was unable to develop spiritual intelligence and cultivate immortality. However, it absorbed a considerable amount of the essence of the universe and gave birth to the first wood spirit in the celestial realm. It was the current owner of the wood-killing sea, Old Man Mu Muyuanzi. Later, due to the endless disputes between the three realms, Muyuanzi couldn't stand the disturbance and wanted to open up a world to live in. However, with his cultivation he was far from being able to open up a world alone. He had to borrow the magical effect of the ancient language tree, the ancestor of all trees, and use it as a medium to open up a small world. Thus, the wood-killing sea and the celestial realm overlapped. It was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds at the same time. It was very magical. It was also because the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea overlapped that with Mu Yuanzi's current cultivation, as long as there were plants in the two worlds, he could open the profound door at any time and go anywhere in the two worlds. However, Lu didn't have that ability. If she wanted to open the profound door and go between the two worlds, not only did she need the power of Mu Yuanzi's staff, she also needed to find a stable medium, which was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the plants in the ancient forest treated the ancient language tree as the key to entering the wood-killing sea. A long time ago, when Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was still weak, he did often open the profound door here to go between the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea. After a long time, it was inevitable that he would be seen by others. However, Yu Qianqiu felt a rich and fragrant spiritual energy seeping into his heart. His mind was instantly roused. Just as he was about to praise and flatter Mu Yuanzi, his brain twitched uncontrollably. In an instant, his vision turned black, and images of the starry night sky that he had been dreaming of appeared in his mind. The countless stars that seemed to be in a mess flipped through his mind night after night, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, the movements of the stars became traceable. However, this scene in his mind only lasted for a few moments. When the wind blew past and the fog dispersed, Yu Qianqiu woke up from his daze. Although he had woken up, his body trembled in the next moment. He looked somewhat excitedly at the mist that curled up from the ink-like layer of forest that covered the mountains and plains, the Eastern Star Map. It was the Eastern Star Map that had been deeply engraved in his mind. For so long he had been helpless against it. However, in that instant, it had suddenly been triggered. The pattern was so clear. Could it be that this was the land of great fortune to cultivate the wood's secret art? Yu Qianqiu's heart surged in that instant. He repeatedly repeated the 3 words, "Would killer see," in his heart. The grandfather and grandson both saw his abnormal reaction and followed his gaze down the mountain. They did not find anything out of place. Mu Yuanzi's walking stick suddenly slammed into the ground, causing the entire mountain to shake. He shouted in a low voice, "Are you trying to play the fool and avoid answering?" Yu Qianqiu's figure shook and he hurriedly cupped his hands and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, you've misunderstood me. I haven't cultivated any wood attribute cultivation technique. On the contrary, Senior's warning just now has enlightened me, and I've gained some comprehension. Perhaps I really can cultivate a wood attribute cultivation technique." Nonsense. Mu Yuanzi pointed his walking stick at Lu and said, "If you did not cultivate a wood secret art, how could you have smelled the fragrance on Lu body? You actually dare to play such a small trick on this old man's head. If not for the fact that you saved Lu, you crafty scoundrel would have already lost your life under this old man's walking stick." Yu Qianqiu was confused by him. He felt that this old man was relying on his high cultivation to be unreasonable. He was both angry and amused as he said, "What does whether I cultivate a wood secret art or not have to do with being able to smell the fragrance on Lu's body? These are completely unrelated matters. Senior must drag it into this. Aren't you taking advantage of your power to bully others?" Taking advantage of your power to bully others? What an ignorant junior. You actually dare to boast shamelessly in front of this old man. Mu Yuanzi's aura changed and directly pressed down on Yu Qianqiu with an unstoppable force. Lu turned pale with fright and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu with a whoosh. She looked at Mu Yuanzi and pleaded, "Grandpa! Get out of my way." Mu Yuanzi shouted with an imposing manner, "If I want to kill him, can you stop me?" Yu Qianqiu was already prepared to run away. At this point he also did not intend to endure it anymore. He immediately shouted angrily, "Old man Mu! Killing someone is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. If you want to kill me, just say so. There's no need to splash dirty water on me. Damn it. You disrespectful old thing, and you still have the guts to shamelessly teach your granddaughter. It would be strange if you didn't teach her bad things. No wonder Lu always wants to run out. Anyone who sees a shameless old fellow like you will feel disgusted." Lu exclaimed. This was the first time she heard someone scold her grandfather like this. She hurriedly turned around and waved her hands at him. I didn't. I just want to go out and play. I don't hate grandfather at all." Mu Yuanzi was stunned on the spot. After so many years, this was the first time someone dared to speak to him like this. He was so angry that he laughed instead. "No one has ever doubted my character. Good. Today I will let you die knowing the truth." As he spoke, he waved his big sleeves and a thick aura spread out. What followed was the same fragrance as Lu's body, but it was even thicker than Lu's. Made one feel refreshed. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't help but take a few more breaths. "You smell it, right?" Mu Yuanzi looked at Yu Qianqiu's reaction and sneered. "Lu and I are the wood spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth. Our bodies are born with a kind of aura that represents life. Ordinary people can't smell it at all. Only those who cultivate wood attribute spells can smell that special fragrance. You still dare to say that you don't cultivate wood attribute spells? You still dare to say that you didn't lie to this old man? So that's how it is. But that wasn't right either." Yu Qianqiu looked at the grandfather-granddaughter duo with a face full of doubt. He scratched his head and said, "I do have the possibility of cultivating wood attribute spells, but the key is that I haven't started cultivating yet." Mu Yuanzi snorted coldly and said, "Don't think that I don't know what you're up to. As long as a person who cultivates wood attribute spells devours a wood spirit, not only can he possess the innate magical powers of a wood spirit, but he can also transfer the cultivation of a wood spirit to himself. If it weren't for the fact that you accidentally barged in, this old man would have beaten you to death long ago. How could you still be talking nonsense here?" When Lu heard that Yu Qianqiu could devour a wood spirit, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She teleported behind Mu Yuanzi and poked her head out to look at Yu Qianqiu timidly. It was as if she had seen Grandmother Wolf. Seeing that this innocent little girl had also misunderstood him, Yu Qianqiu immediately said angrily, "Old man Mu. If you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. If this old man really had the ability you say or the intention you say, I would have made my move when I rescued Lu back to the World Chamber of Commerce. Why would I wait until now to make my move? When Lu heard this, she immediately nodded in agreement. She knew very well that after Yu Qianqiu saved her, he couldn't chase her away no matter what. It was she who stubbornly followed him to the World Chamber of Commerce. Moreover, those sisters in the World Chamber of Commerce were all very good to her. None of them had any ill intentions towards her. Mu Yuanzi was stunned, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was true. In the blink of an eye, his tone softened a little as he said, "Maybe you have a bigger plan. Maybe you're deliberately expressing goodwill to Lu, but in reality you're after my cultivation." When he heard that his tone had softened, Yu Qianqiu immediately took advantage of the situation and became unforgiving. He was so angry that his face turned red, and he stomped his feet exaggeratedly as he scolded, "You unreasonable old man, why would I want you? Don't say that this old man can't find you. Even if I find you, so what? With your cultivation, it's a piece of cake for you to deal with me. Don't tell me that this old man is tired of living, so I first ran over to let you kill me, and then conspire against you? What bullsh*t logic, who are you trying to fool?" When Lu heard this, she immediately nodded repeatedly in agreement. She didn't beat around the bush and stood on the side of whoever she felt was right. She didn't think about her grandfather at all as she walked resolutely to Yu Qianqiu's side, looking a little like she was siding with an outsider. Could it be that there was some other unknown reason why this brat could smell the fragrance on the wood spirit's body? Mu Yuanzi immediately fell silent. He was actually a person who thought highly of himself, and had always prided himself on being an otherworldly expert. Even the domineering demon god knight had to respectfully address him as senior when he saw him. These were all things that he was proud of. Could it be that he had wrongly accused someone? Although he didn't feel good in his heart, and although he also had a temperament that thought highly of himself, to be able to live peacefully in seclusion here meant that he was a person who could take things up and let them go. After a moment of silence, he resolutely said, "I'll let you go this time, but if I find out that you're trying to fool this old man in the future, even if you have to ascend to the heavens or dive into the earth, I'll make sure you die under this old man's staff." As he spoke, he was about to wave his staff to open the profound gate and let Yu Qianqiu leave. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily and raised his hand to stop him. "Let's talk about the future in the future. There's no need to be polite with an unreasonable person like you. From today onwards we'll return to our own paths. Let's first clear up the debts that we owe in the past. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. Let's pretend we've never met before." "Could it be that I owe you something?" Mu Yuanzi sneered and stood with his staff on the ground, revealing an expression that didn't know what was good for him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Lu. He said with righteous indignation, "Back then there were a few experts who wanted to molest Lu. It was I who risked my life to save Lu's life, and also protected Lu's innocence. How much is this debt worth? How should this debt be settled?" Chapter 11:18. Lu was stunned on the spot as she recalled the situation back then. She didn't know whether those people who bullied her were experts or not, but she didn't see how much danger Yu Qianqiu had risked to save her. It seemed like he had scared those people away the moment he appeared. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with some grievance and pouted. Hearing Yu Qianqiu's words, it seemed like he wanted to draw a line between them. Mu Yuanzi choked for a moment. He didn't expect this fellow to act like a scoundrel, asking for a reward after doing a good deed. He was too tasteless. However, in all these years only others owed him Mu Yuanzi favors. He had never owed anyone a favor. Moreover, this person had indeed saved his granddaughter. Since he had opened his mouth, he wasn't as thick-skinned as Yu Qianqiu to deny it. This was the weakness of a person who thought highly of himself. Yu Qianqiu took advantage of this point and acted like a scoundrel. "How do you want to settle this debt? How much money do you want?" Mu Yuanzi spat out word by word. He was just short of beating someone up. Although his cultivation was high, he didn't have a single spirit stone on hand. When it came to money, he really had a headache. "Money? I am the dignified sect master of the world commerce. Do I still lack spirit stones?" Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of disdain. "I, Yu Qianqiu, have always been a straightforward and upright person. I won't beat around the bush. I am about to cultivate a set of wood attribute spells. Your wood ocean of massacre is beneficial to my cultivation. I want to borrow your precious land to cultivate in seclusion. After this, the grudges between us will be settled. How about it?" Mu Yuanzi's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that this person would dare to say he wanted to cultivate a wood attribute spell in front of him. Moreover, he wanted to do it right under his nose. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was extremely daring. After staring at Yu Qianqiu for a while, he stopped looking at him and turned around to face the vast sea of Mu Shahai with his walking stick and said slowly, 1 year. I'll give you 1 year's time. I don't care how long you need to go into seclusion. Once the 1-year period is over, you must immediately scram out of the Wood Killer Sea. After that, you're not allowed to meet Lu again. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die. These words meant that he had agreed to Yu Qianqiu, but he added another condition. Grandpa. Lu called out, feeling wronged. Then she looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook her head repeatedly, signaling him not to agree. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, turned his head away guiltily, pretending not to see anything. Judging from his past experience, he reckoned that it would not take more than a year to practice the wood secret art. He then shouted, "Fine. It's a deal." After hearing the reply, Mu Yuanzi let out a cold snort. Ignoring Lu, his figure flashed and he disappeared from the mountain peak. He was not afraid that Yu Qianqiu would cause any trouble in the Wood Killer Sea, because if something happened, Yu Qianqiu would have nowhere to run even if he wanted to. This was his territory. As long as he did not open the Gate of Wonders, taking care of Yu Qianqiu would be a piece of cake. Under the ancient language tree at the mountain peak, Lu buried her head to the side with a depressed expression, not making a sound. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose helplessly, coughed and said, "Lu, where are your parents? It's my first time here, so I should pay them a visit." "Lu is a wood spirit, how could I have parents?" Lu lowered her head and muttered softly. Yu Qianqiu made an "oh" sound when he heard this. Then he turned to a relaxed smile and said, "Lu, are you angry at me?" Lu did not make a sound, indicating her tacit agreement. Yu Qianqiu helplessly smiled bitterly. With a hint of a fawning tone, he half coaxed and half begged, "Lu, I want to choose a place to cultivate, can you bring me around the Wood Killer Sea to look around?" The little lass was soft-hearted and could not resist coaxing. She only hesitated for a short while before revealing a reluctant expression. She pouted and said, "What's so good about the Wood Killer Sea? It's the same everywhere." Yu Qianqiu chuckled and waved his hand to retrieve the 2 swords with the grilled fish stuck in them. He directly floated in the air. When Lu also flew up, he looked around and asked, "Where do you and your grandfather usually live?" Lu heard this and flew into the distance without a word. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he followed. Flying over a small plain in a valley, he saw a towering tree that had fallen to the ground and bloomed. The lush canopy covered an area of several miles. There were many egrets nesting on the canopy, and on the plain grassland that was enshrouded in white mist, there were many bison coming and going in groups. It was a natural and beautiful scene. Yu Qianqiu did not know why the little lass brought him here, but he saw Lu point at the tree on the plain and say, "There is a hole in the tree trunk that spirals upwards. It's a natural residence and it's very spacious. Grandfather and I live in there." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He thought that it was naturally no problem for people to live in such a large tree trunk, so he asked, "You said that the people in the Wood Killer Sea always let you play mahjong. Are there other people living in the treehouse?" "Only grandfather and I live in the treehouse. Other people do not dare to come here and disturb grandfather." Lu waved her hand and pointed at the vast Wood Killer Sea and said, "They are scattered in the forest in all directions to practice. When I want to play mahjong, I will sneak into the forest to find them." Yu Qianqiu replied with an "oh." He wanted to visit the treehouse to see what it was like. However, he thought that old man Mu did not like him and that going there would only be a thrill, so he dismissed the idea. He looked around and sighed. "I'd better find a place to practice in seclusion." Lu did not object, and the two went straight to the west one after another. Looking down from the sky, the terrain of the entire Wood Killer Sea was very simple. There were hills, mountains, plains, lakes and rivers. The ground was mostly covered with green vegetation. There were no deserts, no Gobi, no seas and no snowfields. It was a planet with green vegetation, and it was not without reason that it was named Wood Killer Sea. The area of this green planet was not big. It was at most 1/10 of the size of the human world that Yu Qianqiu was in. The two flew and stopped for less than a day, and they had already circled the Wood Killer Sea once and flew to the sky above the ancient language tree. There was nothing to be picky about here if he wanted to practice in seclusion. Finally, Yu Qianqiu pointed to a dense forest that was enshrouded in white fog and asked, There won't be any problems if I go to that forest to practice in seclusion, right? I'll go greet them. They won't disturb you. Luer, who was in a much better mood, flew down first, and Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind. The them that Luer referred to were actually some of the plant demons in the forest. They were all dressed in strange attire, and when they saw Luer, they were very respectful. Luer told them the purpose of Yu Qianqiu's visit, and the group of plant demons immediately obeyed. It was as if Luer was their master. After the plant demons memorized Yu Qianqiu's appearance, they all disappeared into the forest, and the silent Yu Qianqiu impatiently sat cross-legged in the dense fog of the forest. Seeing that he entered the state so quickly, Luer pouted unhappily. She was blaming him for burning the bridge after crossing it. Little did she know that when Yu Qianqiu descended into this dense forest that was enshrouded in spiritual fog, the nerves in his brain immediately twitched, and the vast star map in his brain was immediately activated. However, seeing that there were many living people present, he had no choice but to resist. When all the living people left, he immediately sat cross-legged and entered the state, afraid that he would miss the opportunity to comprehend the wood art. Although Luer was a little unhappy, she didn't dare to disturb him. She quietly floated a few miles away, but she didn't go too far. Moreover, she would often sneak back to observe Yu Qianqiu's movements. The forest was quiet and the dense fog drifted. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting cross-legged, was faintly discernible in the fog, like an old monk in meditation, not moving at all. After a few days, his eyebrows gradually locked together, as if he had encountered something he couldn't figure out. Luer, who had been secretly observing him, was very curious. She didn't know what kind of heart demon he had encountered in the process of cultivation that he couldn't resolve, so she flew and sat on the trunk of an ancient tree not far from Yu Qianqiu, and continued to secretly observe Yu Qianqiu. After another half a month, Yu Qianqiu's tightly locked eyebrows finally began to gradually relax, as if he had already found a solution to the problem. He was here in seclusion to comprehend the wood art. Outside in the ancient forest, the great bright wheel was becoming more and more anxious under the ancient language tree. The fish no longer had the mood to continue roasting, but it couldn't find a better solution, so it could only wait anxiously under the ancient language tree. However, the others, led by Jin Tai and Bai Qi, were still unwilling to give up. They continued to search in the ancient forest, and they had almost searched the entire ancient forest. In the blink of an eye, a month's time quickly passed. Luer, who felt that it was somewhat dull, gradually lost her patience. She was currently lying on the trunk of the tree with her hands supporting her chin, and her legs hooking and kicking as she watched two praying mantises fight. Just as the two little insects were entangled and biting each other, a strange throbbing suddenly spread out from under the tree. The movements of the two biting insects froze, as if they had also sensed that something was amiss. Luer looked down the tree with some surprise. She saw that the mist around Yu Qianqiu was spreading out in all directions like ripples. Not long after, the mist in this area of the forest was completely dispersed without a trace. Luer, who was feeling strange, suddenly stood up. She turned her head left and right to look in all directions, and a strange green splendor appeared in her eyes. She immediately discovered that the surrounding trees and vines were continuously emitting indiscernible specks of green light. They scattered and fluttered towards Yu Qianqiu's body and gathered on his body. At first, it was just specks of green light probing. Then it developed into patches. The specks of green light swarmed into the pores all over Yu Qianqiu's body. He's absorbing the wood element. Luer cried out in shock. Then she quickly covered her mouth, afraid that she would disturb Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. However, it didn't take long before Luer felt afraid. The specks of green light of the wood element were pouring out of the trees in all directions at a terrifying speed, gathering on the cross-legged sitting Yu Qianqiu's body in an endless stream. Those ancient trees that had grown for hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, as well as the vines on the ground, were all withering at a visible speed. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.